Game of Thrones escape game. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 1, Ice and Fire, Escape Game. This is the contract for this competition. Mr. Xia Ze, if you have no questions, just sign here. Xia Ze did not answer, but silently took the contract from the other party and read it. About the participation agreement of Ice and Fire, Escape Game. Party A provides Party B with a way to cross and a body to use in the world of Ice and Fire. Party B voluntarily goes to the world of Ice and Fire to participate in this competition and bears the corresponding legal responsibilities for this. Rules details. Prize details. The organizer of the game is an upper plane organization that descended on Xia Ze's world more than 10 years ago. They brought extraordinary power that Xia Ze and his world had never had. Fortunately, their purpose is not to conquer, but entertainment. What's more valuable is that they also abide by local laws. For example, the game that Xia Ze is about to participate in requires a contract to be signed in advance. It took Xia Ze nearly half an hour to read this not so long agreement word by word. The content of the agreement can be roughly summarized into the following 4 points. 1. Introduction to the game. This is a competition held in the world of Ice and Fire, with a total of 100 players participating. 2. Victory rules. After eliminating all players outside the alliance or the total points of the alliance exceed 10,000, all players in the alliance can unanimously agree to declare victory. If the alliance players cannot reach an agreement, the alliance will automatically break up. Players can form an alliance through the auxiliary system after entering the game. Each alliance cannot have more than 4 people. When the final victory is announced, all surviving players will be transferred back to the original world 1 hour after the start of the game. 3. Bonus rules. 1 person wins and enjoys 10 billion knives alone. 2 people win together and share 1 billion knives. 3 people win together and share 10 million knives. 4 people win together and share 1 million knives. 4. Risk warning. The death of a player in the game will result in real death. So, Mr. Xia Ze, the receptionist of the organizer, saw Xia Ze put down the documents in his hand, so he asked, "Do you have any questions?" Of course, Xia Ze nodded. "As far as I know, you have held similar competitions more than once before, but the prize money was always quite satisfactory. But this time the prize money was unprecedentedly high. I want to know why. I wonder if you have noticed the name of our competition? Ice and Fire Escape Game?" Xia Ze raised his eyebrows. "To be honest, I don't quite understand this name either. I have seen your previous competitions, and they are all Lord competitions without exception, so the type of our competition this time is different from the previous ones," the receptionist said. "First, our previous competitions usually focus on the hegemony after the player becomes a lord, so we will give the player greater development support to help them quickly get through the early stage. In the later stages of the game, the probability of the player's death will drop sharply, because when a player finds that he has lost the chance of winning, he only needs to give up the next game, find a small village to hide, and wait until other players meet the victory conditions, and then he can return to the original world as a survivor. But this time is different. Yes, this time we have put the competition in the whole period of the game, which means that from the moment players land, they will be caught in fierce competition and even kill each other. Moreover, this time we will only provide players with extremely limited development resources, and players must take huge risks to fight for them. In fact, I can tell you that a large number of players may not only not get any resources from the auxiliary system throughout the whole process, but also have to run around because of certain mechanisms. Therefore, in this competition, the risks faced by players are greater than any previous time. It can even be said that it is not surprising if only a single-digit number of players survive in this competition. Can you tell me more specific information? For example, the mechanism that you mentioned that will make players run around." Xia Ze interrupted the receptionist. "Of course, no." The receptionist shook his head, with an unchanging textbook smile on his face. "Any specific game mechanism, players need to enter the game to view it. Okay, the receptionist handed the pen in his hand to Xia Ze. I have already informed you of the risks in advance. Before the final list is confirmed, you can choose to withdraw or sign. You know I have no choice. Xia Ze smiled and shook his head, took the pen handed by the receptionist, and signed his name on the agreement. If he could not get a huge amount of medical expenses, he would have less than 3 months left to live if he was seriously ill. No matter how risky this game was, this was his only choice. Even if he died in the game, as long as he could survive for 3 months in the other world, it would be a profit. So when he received the invitation from the organizer to participate in the competition, he agreed immediately and participated in several preliminary assessments. The assessment was divided into question answering test, scenario test and competition test, and admission was based on the total score. Although Xia Ze did not participate in the competition test due to physical reasons, he still stood out from nearly 10,000 applicants with his high scores in the first 2 items, and got a place in the main competition. Okay, Mr. Xia Ze, your place in the competition has finally been confirmed. The receptionist operated on the tablet. Please take a rest. After our team has processed all the players' participation, I will take you to the operation room. Xia Ze did not answer, but closed his eyes and waited for the result. After a while, the receptionist spoke again. Mr. Xia Ze, a total of 27 players who have obtained a place in the main competition have withdrawn from the competition. These players have been replaced from the applicants with lower scores. So few? Only less than 1/3 of them withdrew from the competition? Xia Ze was a little surprised. Haha, Mr. Xia Ze, you should know that not all contestants come from peaceful countries like you. For those residents living in war-torn areas, facing such a prize of hundreds of millions, a 90% mortality rate is not worth mentioning at all. Xia Ze laughed awkwardly. In addition, I have some bad news to tell you. The 2 allies you agreed to have withdrawn from the competition, so you may be alone in the early stages of this competition. Xia Ze's heart sank. He actually had a premonition about the withdrawal of the agreed allies. After all, his 2 allies were Chinese like himself, and their living conditions were not bad. It was completely understandable that they were unwilling to risk their lives. But when he really heard the news, he couldn't help but feel uncomfortable, because that meant that the difficulty of his competition had risen to a new level. Mr. Xia Ze, if you are ready, please follow me. Okay. Chapter 2 Character Creation. The auxiliary system has been activated successfully. Welcome to the Ice and Fire escape game. Hello, Mr. Xia Ze. Your AI assistant Annie is here to serve you. Hello. First, we will create the game character. You have a total of 3 hours for this stage. Please don't rush and study it slowly. 3 hours? Xia Ze felt that this time arrangement naturally brought a serious atmosphere. After all, this time is too long for the creation of a game character, and for those who are risking their lives, this preparation time is too short. Annie did not answer this question. Xia Ze could only look at the text that popped up on the screen with solemnity. What is your bloodline? Andals. Strength +1, unlocks the class Edge Knight First Men. Strength +1 Roina. Agility +1 Unborn. Strength +2, unlocks the class Distressed Pirate, and acquires the trait Seafaring Adaptation Bravus. Agility +2, Trade Skill +1, unlocks the class Wandering Assassin Valyrian Free City Survivors. Trade Skill +1 Dothraki, Agility +2, Riding Skill +1 G, Mental Strength +3 Ivan, Strength +3 Notes. 1. Players can choose one main bloodline and one secondary bloodline. The character's image is mainly expressed by the former, and the latter only has a bonus too. Bloodline will affect the player in all aspects of the entire game. 3. Players will acquire the language and speaking skills corresponding to the living area of the main bloodline. Are looking at this page, Xia Ze fell into deep thought. Tip: all choices can be changed before the final confirmation of the character creation, and reminded him at the right time, so you can make a choice after checking all the options. Xia Ze nodded and clicked the next page directly. Who is your father? A returning veteran, a farmer, A. Who is your mother? Where were you born? Place/time. What did you do in your childhood? What did you do in your youth? What did you become later? Where did you end up? After roughly checking the options for each question, Xia Ze began to try to lock in some options in order to find the best combination. Soon, he found a pattern. That is, when he locked in a certain question, some of the options in other questions would automatically reduce. For example, when he chose Ironborn as his race, the farmer in the subsequent occupation would disappear. After all, we do not soil. Force is better than hard farming. Greyjoy family language, literally translated as we do not farm. When he chose to become a craftsman in the final occupation, he must choose a craftsman apprentice in his childhood and youth experiences. This is a very common setting. The purpose is to make the player's character background logic self-consistent. It took him nearly an hour to read less than 1/3 of the options, because the options provided by the system are too rich. For example, the identity of parents. It can be said that except for nobles, all identities that can appear in a real world are listed in the options. Even eunuchs and silent nuns are not spared. Therefore, Xia Ze had to change his strategy and chose to lock from the back to the front. First, looking at the current professions that have the greatest impact on the three factors of board, funds, and equipment. Soon, Xia Ze found the 5 professions that he thought were the most competitive: hired knights, wandering mercenaries, stranded pirates, brotherhood hunters, and traveling merchants. Among them, the advantages of hired knights and traveling merchants are the greatest. Although the hired knight is slightly inferior to the other 3 combat professions on the board, Xia Ze doesn't know why it is set like this. Probably for strength balance. He has a trained horse and a complete set of armor, including a nose helmet or throat guard, an old chainmail, a pair of chainmail gloves, and a pair of greaves. Compared with the minor differences on the board, Xia Ze believes that a set of armor will bring more advantages to players in the early stage. After all, the reason why Siriofal, the greatest swordsman in the world, Era's words, was killed by Meryn Trant, the stupid Kingsguard who any male prostitute can beat 3 of them, was because Meryn had a set of damn armor hounds words. The traveling merchant is strong because he has a huge fund of 100 gold dragons at the beginning, and the traveling merchant also has 4 servants, almost no combat power, 4 old pack horses, 2 carts, and 7 mules at the beginning. This is undoubtedly the best starting choice for the behind the scenes flow. If it weren't for the average attribute of the traveling merchant being only 5, Xia Ze might have chosen it immediately. These 2 professions are considered T0. Then there are the wandering mercenaries. Their equipment is slightly simple, only a short sword and leather armor, but the board data ranks first, and the combat power is very impressive. The pirate in distress has an initial capital of 10 gold dragons, which is a good comprehensive profession. The only disadvantage is that it is limited to the Ironborn. Considering the reputation of the Ironborn in the entire world of ice and fire, if the player wants to choose this, he must put the Ironborn in the second bloodline, otherwise he will be a rat crossing the street wherever he goes. The Brotherhood Hunter is not too outstanding compared to the other few, but as the only ranged profession that can be chosen, it can always attract some loyal archers, and the Hidden Barrow Wounding is more in line with the player's style. These 3 professions are considered T1. T2 includes, but is not limited to, ascetic priests, wandering red monks, wandering assassins, and Rhone River pirates, which do not see any advantages, but are still acceptable. As for the last ones, such as landless farmers, pickpockets, newly escaped slaves, beggars in flea pits, or ducks in bankrupt inns, Xia Ze suspects that the planner is humiliating the player's IQ. This is going to another world to risk your life. Which idiot would choose to be naughty at this time? After completing the analysis of the profession, Xia Ze began to try to lock from the back to the front, and soon tried out some very good combinations. For example, choose the blood of the Andal people and the Dothraki people. The father is a mercenary, the mother is a maid in the knight's manor, the child is a sparring partner for the master in childhood, and was sent to the castle to serve the knight as a squire in his youth. After adulthood, he was knighted for his military exploits, and finally went out to become a hired knight. At the beginning, he was a horseman with good equipment and attributes, and his combat effectiveness was not bad. For example, Choose the blood of the Iron People and the Iban People. The father is a pirate. The mother is a salt concubine robbed from the Iban People. The child is a helper on the ship. The teenager follows the pirates to sea and becomes a formal pirate in adulthood. Finally, he went ashore because the ship hit the reef. At the beginning, he is a berserker whose strength directly exceeds 30. However, Xia Ze has a doubt about this. That is, don't the Iban people and other races have reproductive isolation? How was this guy born? After comprehensive consideration, Xia Ze finally decided to take into account the early and late stages. On the basis of choosing the andals needed to unlock the Help Knights, he chose the Ancients as his second bloodline. Because there is a note in the bloodline selection that claims that bloodline will have an impact on the player in all aspects of the entire game, Xia Ze guessed that the qualification to learn magic should be one of them. According to Xia Ze's experience as a game planner for so many years, it is only a matter of time for players to learn magic in a game designed with a world with magic as the background. So what magic is there in the world of ice and fire? The most famous one is undoubtedly the resurrection spell of Valyria, the Lord of Light, but this kind of bug level magic is unlikely to allow players to possess it on their own. It is more likely to let players try to recruit Thoros of Mir and Melisandre, the Red Robe Woman, so the remaining magic of the Lord of Light is relatively useless. Either the reading time is extremely long and there is no use, or the cost is too high to be accepted. Apart from the magic of the Lord of Light, the most famous is obviously the green magic of the ancestors. Not to mention the bug level ability of the three-eyed raven to see through the past and the future. The green magic of shaper shifting, that is, possessing consciousness on animals, and precognitive dreams are very practical little magic. The abilities of combat, reconnaissance and danger prediction are all available, and the side effects are far less than other magic. The point is that the magic of the Lord of Light may not be restricted by bloodline, but green magic is likely to require the bloodline of the ancestors. As for the most popular ability of riding a dragon, it requires the pure bloodline of the Valyrian Dragon King, even if it is mixed with a little mixed blood. But the people of the Free Trade City call themselves Valyria survivors, and it is a bit of a self-flattering. Therefore, Xia Ze did not take the Valyria Free Trade City survivors into consideration. In the end, Xia Ze chose the ancestors as his second bloodline, to avoid the situation of not being qualified to learn green magic in the future. Chapter 3 Background Overview. After determining his bloodline profession and growth path, Xia Ze set his sights on the last option, the starting location. Where did you end up? Westeros, Essos, Sithorius. Looking at this option, Xia Ze couldn't help but pull the corner of his mouth. He could understand Westeros and Essos, but what the hell was Sithorius? That was a ghost place with no human habitation and full of poisonous miasma. Even the greatest explorer couldn't survive there. If the player started there, wouldn't it be a real death trap? After thinking about it, Xia Ze clicked on Westeros, mainly because the original book described this area in more detail. Xia Ze believed that he could develop better in the early stage with this knowledge reserve. Then, more detailed places were displayed. King's Territory, Riverlands, Stormlands, Riverlands, Valley, Dawn, Westerly Northerly Iron Islands, north of the Wall. This time Xia Ze chose the Riverlands, mainly because it was well connected, and no matter where he heard about the competitive games, he could get there as soon as possible. However, just as Xia Ze was about to continue to select a specific city, the system did not display the next option. This surprised him a little, because it meant that the specific starting point of the player was random. In this way, those players who agreed to form an alliance could not start in the same city. They could only rush to the meeting place they had agreed on before after landing randomly. Of course, this would not bring any advantage to Xia Ze, because the meeting would not take them a few days. After finally confirming that the selected information was correct, Xia Ze clicked the confirm button. Please enter your name. Xia Ze repeated, and then casually entered Ian. Please set your image A. Can I pinch my own face? Seeing the preview of the hired knight wearing full armor, holding a half sword, and riding a tamed horse on the screen, Xia Ze was stunned for a moment, and then began to try to modify the knight's face. After a while, Xia Ze found that he really had no talent for pinching faces. The faces he pinched were so ugly that they looked like those in Mount and Blade. so he placed his hope on random generation. After 3 minutes of effort, he finally clicked on the image of a typical blonde dindle youth with good looks. Character generation completed. Soon, a complete background story was delivered to him. Background overview. You have the blood of both the first men and the Andals. Strength +2. Get the skill common spoken language. Your father is a farmer in the Vale, and your mother is a maid in the local knight's estate. In 281 AC. Note 1. You were born into this world as the eldest son in the family. Your father named you Ian. It was an unusually warm late winter, as if spring had come early, because of your birth. However, at the end of the year, the cold of winter suddenly returned to Westeros, and heavy snow fell everywhere. This year was called the wrong spring. Starting capital +200 silver deer. When you were 1 year old, Jon Arryn, the Duke of the Eyrie in the Vale, raised the banner of rebellion, and declared war on the Targaryen royal family. Your father was summoned by the local lords, and took up arms to go south, but never returned. After the war, in order to repay the debt your father owed for purchasing equipment before the war, your mother had to sell the family mill, and took you to the knight's manor, to take care of you. You were clever, and were loved by the knight's wife, who arranged for you to be a tutor for his son who was the same age as you. Spirit +1. Obtained the skills basic etiquette and basic common language reading and writing at the age of 11. You and your little master were sent to the count's castle and began to learn swordsmanship, horsemanship, and lance from the coach. You performed very well. Strength +4, agility +4, obtained the skills basic swordsmanship, basic horsemanship, basic lance. 2 years later, you defeated your little master in a competition and won the qualification to serve as a squire for a knight of the count's family. Strength +5, agility +5, obtained the skills basic swordsmanship, basic lance, basic horsemanship at the age of 16. You shined in a clearing operation against the high mountain clans in the valley, and your master canonized you as a knight after the war. That night, you applied the 7 holy oils and completed the night watch in the sanctuary. Strength +10, agility +10, obtained skills, intermediate swordsmanship, intermediate lance, intermediate horsemanship. Not long after, you got married to the daughter of the steward of a wealthy knight's manor. She was not beautiful, but you were extremely fascinated by her. But on your wedding night, your former young master drunkenly broke into your bridal chamber with 4 guards. With the anger of having been defeated by you, he announced to you that your bride was his subject and he would exercise his sacred right as a lord, the right of first night. However, the tradition of the right of first night, which originated from the ancestors, was abolished as early as the 4th monarch of the Targaryen dynasty, Xia Ze, the oldest king, at the suggestion of his queen Alicent. Therefore, you regarded the other party's order as a provocation and humiliation. You shouted to your servants and friends to come to support you, and a fierce battle broke out between the two sides. After a fierce battle, you killed your former master and his guards, but your wife and companions also died in the melee. The battle caused a fire, and the manor, where you spent your entire childhood, was soon engulfed in flames. You had no time to spare, and hurriedly packed up your belongings, a half-hand sword without a coat of arms, a set of old chainmail without a coat of arms, a tamed horse, 200 silver deer, fled the valley overnight, wandered to the river, and began your career as a hired knight. After the background story, there is a detailed layout information. Ian, strength 21, agility 19, mental strength 1 skills, basic etiquette, basic common language reading and writing, intermediate swordsmanship, intermediate horsemanship, intermediate lance. PS. Reading and writing skills of the same language will directly cover oral skills. And oral skills will be displayed only if you can speak but cannot read. Tip. The bodies used by the players are all bionic people released into this world by the organizer, and they appear out of thin air. The natives of this world will not have any memory of the player characters. After making sure that Xia Ze had read the information, AI spoke, but the system generates a reasonable background story for the player, based on the player's custom choice. The player can obtain knowledge memory related to the background, so as to better integrate into the world of A Song of Ice and Fire with a new identity. This is quite humane, isn't it? Xia Ze nodded. This thing is indeed very helpful to the players. After all, even the players who know the original work and history best will definitely have many omissions in the real life details of a certain profession in this era. But this obviously also brings a problem, that is, it is more difficult for players to find each other. If the disguise is good enough, maybe two players sitting together in a tavern chatting and laughing can't find that the other is a player. This is obviously inconsistent with the receptionist's statement that the players will fall into fierce competition and even kill each other at the beginning. From the perspective of the planner, if he wants the players to kill each other at the beginning, he should not design this mechanism to help players hide their identities. This is unreasonable. Xia Ze silently recorded this problem in the little notebook in his heart. Now that you have completed all the processes in the creation phase, you only need to click the OK button to officially cross over. Annie reminded, although you cannot act in advance before all players have completed the crossover, you can take this time to understand the complete game mechanism and the functions of the auxiliary system. Xia Ze felt that what Annie said made sense. After all, the organizer had a rule that the detailed game mechanism must be understood after entering the game. If he used the preparation time to analyze the mechanism, then he would not waste a single second after the official start. Thinking of this, Xia Ze no longer hesitated and directly clicked the OK button. At the moment he clicked, he suddenly felt as if he was melted. His vision, hearing, and touch disappeared one after another, and the whole world turned into a white. Notes. 1. AC, years after Aegon's conquest, means years after Aegon's conquest. It is the first year when Aegon Targaryen I, the Conqueror, was crowned as the King of the Seven Kingdoms. It is the common calendar in Westeros, also known as the Aegon calendar. Chapter 4, Hedge Knights. Ding. A prompt sound exploded in Ian's mind, waking him up from his deep sleep. He raised his head and looked around in surprise. This was a somewhat olden room. The shaky bed, the dark wooden table due to pollution, and the curtains that had not been washed for a long time all made the place look cheap. There was a drizzle outside the window, which did not bring much coolness, but made the weather even more sultry. Ian just felt sticky and uncomfortable all over. He gently lifted the quilt and found that his whole body was soaked with sweat. For some reason, Ian suddenly had a brain twitch and bit his forearm fiercely. It was not until the intense pain was clearly transmitted to his brain that he barely let go and looked at the teeth marks on his hand with a bitter smile. This feeling was so damn real. Although the organizers were well known in the industry, he had never doubted their ability. But when he really appeared in another world with another body, he still had a feeling that it was too dreamy. After sitting for a few minutes, Ian tried to calm himself down. At this time, he suddenly found that there were indeed some more memories in his mind. Although there were no specific people and places in the memory, there was a complete story with the same background. The clearest of them were some knowledge-related things, such as the coats of arms of the small nobles in the valley, that Ian had not remembered in his previous life. Let's write it as, before entering the game, because the entire content of this book takes place in the world of ice and fire. The entire process of the Andal Knight's vigil in the temple, and some ways of riding and using swords. As the auxiliary AI said, having these memories is very helpful for pretending to be a real mercenary knight. Mercenary knights are also known as hedge knights. Their only wealth is their equipment and war horses. They are named because they often have to sleep under hedges in the wild. Of course, the mercenary knight at the beginning of the game is not so embarrassed, otherwise Ian would not choose him. Taking a deep breath, Ian climbed down from the bed and walked to the window. The sky outside was gloomy, and the glass covered with thick grey reflected Ian's beautiful blonde hair. He hurriedly pushed open the window, and suddenly a majestic tower appeared in his sight. The tall black tower still stood out among the tall castles next to it. However, the top of the tower pointing to the sky was tilted to one side due to melting and deformation, looking like a huge and half-melted black candle. Is that melted stone? The masterpiece of dragon flame? Is this Irenhal? The scene in front of him overlapped with the scene in Ian's memory. He licked his cracked lips and couldn't help but feel dry mouth. Ian turned around and walked to the table, picked up the kettle, and poured it into his mouth. Instantly, he felt a faint spicy feeling and wheat aroma spreading on the tip of his tongue. Damn. This is too damn unlucky. Although it was right to start in the Riverlands, But the Riverlands are so big, why did it have to appear in Harrenhal? Harrenhal was built by the last king of the Iron Islands in the Riverlands, Harren the Black, who spent 40 years and exhausted the financial and material resources of the Riverlands on the shore of the God's Eye Lake to become the largest fortress in Westeros. The walls here are thicker than Storm's End, and its gate is as big as the main fortress of Highgarden. Harren the Black called it an unbreakable fortress. However, just like an unbreakable alliance that collapsed without a fight, the unbreakable walls and towers of Harrenhal did not fall to the siege of ground troops, but encountered the dragon flames from the sky by Valyrian, the dragon ridden by Aegon the Conqueror. Harren the Black was eventually burned to death in the tallest tower along with all his children, and the half-melted black candle in Aegon's sight was named King's Burning Tower. Since then, Harrenhal has been shrouded in the shadow of the curse. Not only have all the families who have been granted the title of Harrenhal been extinct, but anyone who has occupied the castle in any form has basically died miserably. What bad luck. Ian wiped the cold sweat from his head with his sleeve and asked in his heart, by the way, when did we start? King's Hand Jon Arryn has just died. King Robert Baratheon is preparing for his funeral and plans to go to Winterfell after the funeral to invite Eddard Stark to serve as King's Hand. And replied. Ian nodded in understanding. At the beginning of the original Book of Ice and Fire, King Robert was about to reach Winterfell, but now Robert is still in King's Landing and has not set off. The land distance from King's Landing to Winterfell is about 2,300 kilometers. Note 1. Considering that Robert's carriage took the King's Road, it should take him about 2 months to reach Winterfell. In other words, the current time is about 3 months before the beginning of the original book, which is about the end of 297 Aegon calendar. At this time, there is still more than a whole year before the outbreak of the War of the Five Kings in later generations. In other words, Westeros still has more than a year of peace. This made Ian doubt again. When he signed up, the organizer promised that all the designs of this game were prepared before the players crossed over. After the game officially started, the organizer would no longer intervene in the game in any form, the kind that would not fix any bugs found. So what kind of mechanism did the planner design in advance to allow players to give up peaceful development in peacetime and choose to fight other players? You must know that in this kind of game, there is no tolerance for error in the early stage. If you are killed, you will have nothing. Therefore, players should not choose to fight hard in the early stage. Okay, AI, now tell me the detailed mechanism of this game. Ian asked his auxiliary AI with doubts. There are 3 main mechanisms in this game. And he started to introduce directly. The first is the killing mechanism. Every time you kill a player, you will get 4 points and inherit all the unused system resources of the killed player, including points, attribute points, skill points and system props, and get certain additional rewards according to the development of the killed player. Among them, the player will get full benefits if he kills the target himself, and the player's subordinates or other employees assigned by the player will only get 50% of the killing benefits. PS. According to the setting of 100 leagues, 480 kilometers of the wall in the original book and the official map, the area of Westeros with map parts estimated by a big guy is about 9 million square kilometers. Here are 2 data for everyone to make a simple understanding of the size of the world of Ice and Fire. The land distance from Winterfell to King's Landing is about 2,300 kilometers, which is roughly close to the distance from BJ to Shenzhen. The land distance from Winterfell to Castle Black is about 1,100 kilometers, which is roughly close to the distance from BJ to Zion. Chapter 5 Escape Game. Kill rewards. Ian nodded. This will indeed increase players' interest in killing other players, but it won't increase much. Killing a player only gives 4 points, even if you kill them all, it's only 400 points, which is still a huge gap from the 10,000 points required for victory. Moreover, the benefits of non-personal kills are halved, which will also reduce the attractiveness of the killing mechanism to players. After all, except for the early stages, the possibility of a player killing another player personally is almost negligible, unless he is confident enough to ask his men to capture him alive. Go on, AI. Ian waved his hand, his intuition telling him that the big move he planned was still to come. The second is the alliance mechanism. After entering the game, players can reach an alliance face to face through the alliance function of the auxiliary system. Each alliance can accommodate up to 4 people. Players who kill allies in the alliance state will not receive kill rewards, nor can they use them to complete tasks. Let's talk about this later. I don't have any allies. Ian laughed awkwardly and shook his head helplessly. The third is the points rule. Annie jumped directly to the third item after hearing this. Points are the most important strategic resource in this game. They can be obtained by completing system tasks, killing other players, achieving achievements, and completing highlight operations. Each player has one initial point. Points have 3 functions: purchasing items in the points mall, serving as a basis for ranking in the points list, and declaring the final victory. Points list. What is it used for? This game has designed a reward and punishment mechanism based on the player's points ranking. Starting from the first day of the game, the points list will be settled once a month. The top 3 players with the highest points on each settlement day will receive generous rewards corresponding to their rankings. If there is a tie among the top 3, the corresponding rewards will be shared equally by the tied players. For example, if there are 2 people tied for the first place, the total rewards for the first and second place will be shared equally by the 2 people. Starting from the second settlement day, the bottom 3 players in the points ranking will face attacks from the Bravus Faceless, the Karth Regretful Guest, and the local ordinary assassins. If there is a tie for the last 3, the assassination target will be drawn from the last tie for the last place. If there are less than 3 tie for the last place, the remaining place will be drawn from the second to last tie. When the number of surviving players is less than 20, the scoreboard will be cancelled. Fuck. Ian cursed immediately after hearing Anna's explanation of this third mechanism. Originally, Ian was still wondering why such an obvious Lord competition was called Escape Game, but now he understood a little. Isn't this just an alternative poison brushing circle? Strictly speaking, this is even more terrible than brushing poison, because no matter how the players brush the points, there will always be the last 3. In this way, if players want to escape the pursuit of the mechanism, they can only roll in madly. This is simply a disaster. Continue. Besides this, there is no mechanism. You can now close your eyes and enter the auxiliary system in your consciousness to check and familiarize yourself with the functions inside. Ian heard this and immediately closed his eyes and entered the system. The entire system interface is very simple, with only 8 toolbars arranged at the bottom: tasks, alliances, information, achievements, mailboxes, backpacks, points mall, and scoreboards. He first clicked on the taskbar, which had a small question mark on it. After clicking it, there was a note: task function. In view of the ordinary starting conditions of the players, the system will provide tasks to help players develop. Note: there is no penalty for failed tasks. There are 3 sub-toolbars under the task toolbar, namely the main task, bounty task / public task, and optional task / trigger task. Because the game has not officially started yet, the taskbar is completely blank at this moment. Ian just glanced at it and exited, then clicked on the next function. In the alliance function, only the face-to-face alliance button is bright, and the others are grey and cannot be clicked. After clicking face-to-face alliance, it is also blank. There is a small question next to the button, and after clicking it, there is a note: 2 players need to click on this function at the same time within a distance of 1 meter to obtain each other's information. Ian skipped the information, achievements, and mailbox, which were not interesting, and entered the backpack. Backpack, a storage space that can be accessed at any time. The initial space of the backpack is 1 cubic decimeter. Every 10 points spent can expand it to 4 times the original space, and it can be purchased up to 4 times. Obviously, compared with the backpack in the normal game, the backpack provided by the auxiliary system is simply weak. The pitiful 1 cubic decimeter can't even hold a big cup of milk tea. But considering that this is a real world, this kind of space magic function does have some practical significance, such as carrying money. Players are likely to travel around the world for business, and without a fixed industry, it is definitely not appropriate to carry a few kilograms of gold on their bodies at all times. In addition, the system needs a way to issue rewards to players or the mall to issue goods to players. Such a small backpack just meets this function. Returning from the backpack, Ian clicked on the mall. Level 1 mall, large money bag. containing 300 silver deer. 1 point medium money bag, containing 20 gold dragons. 5 points current points. 1. 300 silver deer, no obvious help for running business or buying equipment, but if it is just for buying food, it can probably last for a long time. It is very suitable for those players who have stacked all the attributes in the background selection and have no money at the beginning. 20 gold dragons is a considerable amount of money for the early stage, but the price of 5 points seems a bit expensive. Ian thought and turned to the next page. But what appeared in his field of vision was not the mall of the next level, but a prompt box. Second level mall, preview will be opened. After having 10 points, it should be some more expensive things. Ian made a dispensable judgment. Ding. To crisp metal knocking sounds exploded in Ian's mind one after another, scaring him. What the hell? That's the sound of the task being released. The 3 hours of preparation time has passed, and the game has officially begun. Is the task here? Ian nodded and quickly opened the taskbar. Main mission 1. Road to Honor. Mission description. As a mercenary knight, you have been away from honor for too long. Money has blinded your eyes and made you forget your original oath. Now go and take back your honor. Mission objective. Win a formal lance tournament held in one of the 5 major cities. Mission reward. 5 points, 3 attribute points, 3 skill points, accept. Change. Lance tournament in the 5 major cities? Ian curled his lips. Such a task is simply hell level difficult. Chapter 6 Main Mission 1. The 5 major cities of Westeros are King's Landing, Old Town, Linersport, Gulltown, and White Harbor. They are the 5 port cities that directly provide taxes to the Iron Throne and are also the most densely populated areas in Westeros. Whenever a tournament is held in these cities, knights and mercenaries from all directions will flock to it, including some great nobles. The lance tournament is the most typical aristocratic game. Who can win the tournament championship in these cities? Even the second smallest Gulltown, the smallest White Harbor is in the north, and there is no lance tournament activity, is not the best and rich knight. To put it bluntly, are players who have just started the game qualified to participate in such a formal lance tournament? Not to mention whether the strength is up to standard. The competition armor and competition horses dedicated to the lance competition alone are not something that knight players can afford now. Usually, the thickness of the plate armor used in the competition is more than 4mm, and its price is much higher than the actual combat plate armor with a thickness of only 2mm. The competition horse is a first-class purebred warhorse, and its price is usually several times that of an ordinary warhorse. And what about the hired knight player? An old chainmail and an ordinary trained horse. Of course, if someone is skilled and daring, he can also sign up for the competition, but Ian thinks he is not that wasteful. In his imagination, he will at most participate in some pheasant-reel sword competitions held in the castles of small nobles or some towns. So what does this change mean? Ian asked in his heart. We have designed at least 3 quest lines for each profession that players can choose. Players can choose which one to complete after viewing all the options. Once accepted, they cannot change it again. Hearing this, Ian clicked on the change and secretly prayed that the next task would be more reliable. Main quest 1, the Road of Robbery quest description. People often say that hired knights and robber knights are 2 sides of the same coin. Even if you have never been a robber, you are still affected by the bad reputation of your peers. In this case, perhaps throwing away that meaningless honor would be a better choice. Quest objective: loot the castle or manor of a wealthy knight and plunder more than 100 gold dragons in total. Quest reward: 5 points, 3 attribute points, 3 skill points, accept. Change. Loot the castle of a wealthy knight and plunder more than 100 gold dragons. Ian exhaled, his face completely sullen. He only felt a breath of despair coming towards him. Take the castle of the poorest knight as an example. To plunder such a castle, Ian needs to face at least 1 knight and 1 squire. In this case, it is not impossible for him to win, but the things that can be looted in such a poor knight's castle, let's call it a castle, that can't even afford a guard are probably not as valuable as the knight's armor and horse. Ian couldn't imagine how many jobs it would take to loot 100 gold dragons. What does 100 gold dragons mean? In the original novel, after King Joe was poisoned to death at the Purple Wedding, Sir Adam Marbrand offered a bounty for Sansa Stark, who was suspected of conspiring with the devil to kill the king. The bounty offered was only this much. Take the top grade knight equipment as an example. A set of top grade plate armor from head to toe, a set of high quality longsword and page hammer, a war horse and 2 marching horses only need about 30 gold dragons in total. But in the whole Westeros, only the wealthy knights in the River Reach who own manors and a large amount of land, or the knights in the Westerly who have mines at home can afford such a set of equipment. Even for them, life will become tight after affording such a set of equipment. As for other places, the wealthy knights in the Vale mostly use plate and chainmail, the wealthy knights in the Stormlands mostly wear plate armor, and the knights in the Riverlands simply use chainmail as their main equipment, just like hundreds of years ago. So this task is actually designed for supporting the sword of the gods, right? I just need to chop down 6 king's goods and then strip them of their armor to complete the mission. Ian suddenly thought absurdly. Forcing himself to calm down, Ian clicked change with the last hope. Main mission 1, Golden Road mission description. The first time you raise the sword in your hand for money instead of justice or feudal lord, you suddenly realize the truth of this world. Gold is the only true god, and everything else is false. Mission goal, earn 1000 gold dragons. Mission reward, 5 points, 3 attribute points, 3 skill points, accept change. Ian felt completely numb. Originally 100 gold dragons was already an outrageous number, and this time it directly became 1000. Although there is no limit to the way to earn these 1000 gold dragons, it is 1000 gold dragons. During the War of the Five Kings, Catelyn Tully once secretly let Jaime, who was captured by the coalition army, run away, and asked him to return his 2 daughters after returning to King's Landing. This behavior undoubtedly put the coalition forces of the North and the Riverlands into a very passive situation. In this case, the Lord of the Riverlands, the Duke of Riverrun, Aemond Tully, issued a wanted order for Jaime, and the reward amount was 1000 gold dragons. This is also the highest reward amount ever appeared in Ice and Fire. At that time, Jaime was the commander of the Royal Army, the captain of the King's Guard, one of the strongest knights in Westeros, the heir of the richest Lannister family in Westeros, and the father of King Joe the Great. Crossed out. He was only worth 1000 gold dragons. Perhaps many people think that gold dragons are not worth much when they see Robert holding a competition in King's Landing and offering a bonus of 40,000 gold dragons to the champion knight. But you have to know that the first volume of Ice and Fire was published in the last century. In a common view, it is believed that it was a bug caused by Martin's failure to think so much in the early stage of writing the book. In fact, after Robert's death, when Littlefinger approached Eddard Stark, he mentioned that 6,000 gold dragons were the number to bribe an entire city guard, and Eddard thought this number was reasonable. In other words, 1000 gold dragons is equivalent to bribing 1/6 of the city guard. It is basically nonsense to let early players earn this money out of thin air. Suddenly, Ian had a very terrible idea. He planned and designed several tasks like this. Could it be that he didn't want us to complete the tasks at all? Note, the currency exchange rate in the world of Ice and Fire is 1 gold dragon equals 30 silver moons equals 210 silver deer, 1 silver deer equals 49 bronze stars, 1 bronze star equals 8 bronze cents. In addition, based on some data, the author estimates that the gold dragon is a medium-sized gold coin of 7.56 grams. Key points. This data is only used as a setting for this book, serving the subsequent plot, and is not used as a verification of the original book or history, so don't speculate, let alone use the current gold price to estimate purchasing power. Chapter 7 First Blood and Covenant. Then, Ian remembered what the organizer's receptionist told him before entering the game. This time we put the competition in the whole game, which means that from the moment players land, they will be in fierce competition, and even kill each other. And this time we will only provide players with extremely limited development resources, and players must take huge risks to fight for them. In fact, a large number of players may not only not get a single resource from the auxiliary system throughout the whole process, but also have to run around because of certain mechanisms. In the words of the receptionist, it was clearly hinted that the main task was ridiculously difficult. Otherwise, how could it be called a large number of players cannot get resources from the system throughout the whole process? Ian patted his forehead. If we can't get points by completing tasks, then if we want to avoid being drawn by the assassination mechanism, because we are at the bottom of the scoreboard, we can only get points by hunting other players? Thinking of this, Ian felt a chill on his back. Feeling a huge pressure on his head, Ian didn't dare to waste another second and hurriedly continued to flip down. He remembered that the reminder sound of the task update just sounded twice, which meant that the bounty task was also updated synchronously when the game officially started. Bounty Task 1, First Blood Task Objective, complete the first kill of the player task reward. 3,000 gold dragons, 2,500 of which are provided in the form of gold bars, 3 attribute points, 3 skill points, 2, in the area. Self-selected S-level NPCs note, after the task is completed, it will be notified to other players 1 day later. Looking at this outrageous reward, Ian's breath stagnated. This is what the receptionist said, the extremely limited development resources provided by the system that players need to take huge risks to fight for in order to obtain them. Is it not? In the case that the main task is almost impossible to be completed in the early stage, if the player grabs the first blood resource, his development speed must be far ahead. Not being able to obtain development resources from the system is very hurtful to players in this kind of competition. Unlike those single player time travel scripts, even if the time traveler does not have other cheats, he can thrive with his understanding of the original work and modern knowledge. In this kind of 100 player game, all players are familiar with the original novel. If any player suddenly appears in a situation where he was not originally there, his identity will be instantly discovered by other players who are watching this situation. When there is not enough strength to support it, the exposure of one's identity is almost the same as suicide. For example, every player must have considered whether to go to the Targaryen brothers and sisters who are in a period of decline at the beginning of the game when making a plan, thinking that as long as he is tied to the line of Dragon Mother, he will ride on the wind with the protagonist's halo throughout the game. But this is obviously a dream, because there may be more than 50 players out of 100 players who are staring at Dragon Mother. Any player who shows up in front of Dragon Mother will immediately reveal his identity. If he is not strong enough to be unafraid of other players' plots, he may not live to the next chapter. And even if the player wants to risk his life for a chance, he doesn't have that ability. Because with the mediocre strength and uninfluential identity of the player at the beginning, there is no chance to get close to Dragon Mother. Why do you say that? In the original timeline, Jorah Mormont and Barristan Selmy were the only 2 Westeros who successfully came to the Dragon Queen in the early and middle stages. Why? Is it because they are the only 2 who have this need? No. When the news came out that the Horse King Drogo was going to marry Daenerys, Westeros was full of adventurers, mercenaries, illegitimate children, and even the second sons of those unhappy noble lords, who flocked to the vultures of war, trying to fight for a future for themselves here with this wandering prince who was supported by the Horse King. But in the original story, none of them appeared. Why? There is no doubt that the protector of the Targaryen brothers and sisters, Illyrio, the governor of Pentos, blocked these people. He may be worried that there will be assassins among them, or simply think that these people lack the value of use. In short, he blocked almost all those who wanted to come to Viserys. From the beginning to the end, only Jorah Mormont, the former Earl of Bear Island, and Barristan Selmy, the world-famous former Kingsguard, who were introduced to Daenerys by Illyrio's old friend Varys, were introduced to Daenerys. Without a reliable identity and useful strength, it is simply a pipe dream to want to join Daenerys. This is also the reason why Ian did not choose the continent of Essos as a starting point. It seems a bit far-fetched. Ian shook his head and put his thoughts back on the First Blood mission. I'm a little confused. You say the biggest advantage of AI is that messages are always replied in seconds, just like when Ian first fell in love. First of all, this is a real world, right? Yes. So players won't have health bars on their heads, and NPCs won't have names on their heads, right? Yes. and the organizers have specially prepared reasonable life stories for the players and provided them with relevant knowledge memories, right? Yes. Then how do we find other players? Ian spread his hands. Not to mention that 100 of us are randomly sent to various places in Westeros or even Essos. It's like throwing a handful of salt into the sea. Can we meet them at the beginning? Even if we meet, who can recognize who is the player? Admittedly, I can guess that the 5 popular professions chosen by players are likely to be guessed by other players, but this is obviously not very meaningful for finding hunting targets in the early stages. How many hired knights are there in the whole of Westeros? How many wandering mercenaries are there? If you say you can defend against them, it's possible, but to hunt them, based on this clue, is pure wishful thinking. Therefore, only when a player develops to a level that cannot be ignored, other players will find that he has a problem, because there is no such character in the original book, and at that time the game has at least entered the midterm. This does not conform to your description of players will fight bloody battles at the beginning. So, what did I overlook? I will not answer questions beyond my authority. Anne answered mechanically. In fact, Ian did not expect Anne to answer this question. He was actually asking himself what the method of finding other players is that he has not figured out yet. The so-called finding other players obviously has 2 problems. One is to meet, and the other is to see through. The total area of Westeros exceeds 10 million square kilometers, and the area of Essos is several times that of Westeros. Not to mention the problem that the landing points of players are too scattered. Even if all 100 players are put into King's Landing, it is not easy for everyone to meet in this city with a population of 500,000. Unless the player's activity range is further narrowed, such as entering the same tavern. Fuck. Allies. Those guys who agreed to form an alliance in advance agreed to a specific meeting place. Ian suddenly exclaimed and slapped his thigh. Because his own ally had withdrawn from the competition, he actually ignored the idea of allies when he first thought about the problem. How can players find other players in the early stage? Under normal circumstances, they will definitely not be able to find them. But what if you have agreed to form an alliance with that player? If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 8 Gal Scheming. Since it is an agreed alliance, the meeting place must have been agreed before entering the game. For example, the place where Ian and his 2 previous allies agreed to meet was the Cathedral of St. Bela in King's Landing. However, because his allies withdrew from the game, he changed the starting point to the Riverlands. Now that his allies are gone, other players are not like this. They will definitely meet at iconic buildings such as the Crossroads Inn or Chateau's Tavern as originally planned. Driven by this first blood task, those allies who have agreed to meet will not become ready-made hunting targets. It is true that some players will be wary of this task and will no longer keep the appointment, but humans will never lack adventurers. If there is a 20% profit in doing something, people will be eager to move. If there is a 50% profit, he will dare to take risks. For a 100% profit, he will dare to trample on all human laws. If there is a 300% profit, he will dare to commit any crime, even at the risk of being hanged. And what is the profit of this task? Putting aside the attribute points and skill points, the money alone is a full 3000 gold dragons. With this money and 2 S-level NPCs, the player can even easily form a small army of hundreds of people. In this game where most players cannot get resources from the system, what does it mean to be the first to get such a large amount of resources? He may be difficult to surpass in the next few years, and even get rid of the threat of the assassination mechanism of the scoreboard, and develop freely in the way he wants. There is no reason for players not to take this risk. But the second problem is still not solved. Ian quickly calmed himself down again. See through. How can players see through other players' disguises? First, let's assume that 2 allies who have made an appointment in advance meet at the agreed place, but in the case of the First Blood mission, they can't rashly use the pre-arranged code to hint each other's identity, right? They will definitely hide themselves carefully while trying to test others. But how can a wary player test out so easily? Everyone is an elite player who has fought through so many qualifiers and made it to the siege. How can they easily reveal their flaws? From the perspective of the planner, since he has designed it to this point, it means that in his opinion, players can definitely see through each other. That is to say, there are some flaws that none of us know or have overlooked. Ian suddenly thought of the background story. According to Annie, the background story exists to help players disguise themselves. But obviously, the planner does not want the players to disguise themselves well. On the contrary, he hopes that the players can see through each other and fight. This makes the planner's behavior very contradictory. Unless there is something wrong with the background story, Ian quickly closed his eyes and opened the auxiliary system and entered the data column to read his background story in detail again. Soon, he really found a small problem. That is, he had no surname. Originally, as a commoner in the valley, he did not have a surname at the beginning, but in the subsequent story, he had been canonized as a knight, which meant that he had the qualifications to give himself a surname. But he still had no surname, which was very unusual. However, this was just a small problem, and it was not a flaw that would be discovered, and this problem should only be unique to players who started as hired knights, not a problem that all players had. Yes, all players. In order to achieve the goal of stable discovery, this flaw should be shared by all players, at least the vast majority of players. In other words, what is the common point of the flaw among all of us? What is the common point of the players that is obvious enough to be a flaw that most people can discover? It is impossible that they like to walk by jumping, right? This is the real world. It is impossible to play by jumping, okay? Wouldn't it be tiring? Ian paced back and forth in the room while thinking about this question. Suddenly, his eyes fell on the equipment he had piled up in the corner. A 1.5-handed sword, a nose helmet, or throat guard, an old chainmail, a pair of chainmail gloves and a pair of greaves. In a trance, the preview image of the final interface of character creation appeared in front of him again. Fuck. Starting equipment. It's the starting equipment. The starting equipment of each profession is the same, and more than 90% of players should have chosen the 5 professions listed by Ian. This means that except for the face, the other parts of the player's images at this moment are exactly the same as the preview image on the final interface when creating a character. Among them, the traveling merchants are the most obvious. Their set of 4 servants, 4 old pack horses, 2 carts and 7 mules is almost a clear card, but correspondingly, they will definitely find that they are easily exposed, so they will make changes. The second is the hired knights, because they abnormally have a full set of equipment that usually only knights with property can have, but they don't even have a squire. Of course, the shipwrecked sailor and the brotherhood hunter are not much better. After all, these 2 professions are relatively uncommon, and one uses a throwing axe and the other uses a yew longbow, which are also easy to detect. In terms of concealment, I'm afraid that only the wandering mercenary is better. After all, Westeros is full of mercenaries in all its taverns, and the old leather armor plus short sword and dagger that the wandering mercenary wears at the beginning is almost the same as that of the natives. But except for the wandering mercenary, once other professions appear at the meeting place agreed by the players, they will probably react as soon as they meet. Have I seen this guy somewhere before? This is the real purpose of the planner designing a background story for the players. He deliberately made the character creation options so complicated, just to let each player have many differences and ignore the similarities brought by the final profession. He let the AI deliberately interpret the existence of the background story as letting players have background memories for better disguise, just to mislead the players and give them a preconceived impression that they are not easy to be detected. When the human brain receives information about a certain matter, the first point of view it accepts usually has a greater influence, and even makes people not actively think about the opposite possibility. Even Ian himself ignored the obvious flaw of the starting equipment at the beginning. Since the organizer will not be able to interfere with the progress of the game by any means after the game starts, the planner chose to use this method to lay out in advance to quickly trigger the players' fights, making the game more exciting. Damn. I didn't expect that in this game of 100 people, the first enemy the players had to face was not each other, but the trap designed in advance by the planner gal. Chapter 9 Hunting Plan. But correspondingly, when Ian saw through Gao's conspiracy, this information instantly became his biggest card at the moment. Now, Ian's next plan has become very clear. He wants to change his initial features, and then go to the place that is most likely to be regarded as the meeting point of allies to squat other players. He is now in Harrenhal, so the closest meeting place to him that may be chosen by other players is obviously the crossroads and at the intersection of the Kingdom Avenue running north-south and the River Avenue and Valley Avenue running east-west. As the intersection of the north, the Riverlands, the Valley and the King's Territory, Ian believes that there must be many players who will appear there, whether they have agreed to form an alliance there, or are simply passing by. The next question is, how to disguise yourself? And after successfully hiding yourself, and discovering other players, how to defeat them? Both problems are not easy to solve. The first is the change of initial features. This idea is beautiful, but it is not easy to operate. Because none of the equipment on Ian's body, which is a clear feature, is redundant. Whether it is weapons, armor or horses, these things are Ian's core equipment at the moment. In fact, the reason why he chose to start as a hired knight is for this set of equipment. He can't afford to buy better armor with only 200 silver deer on him. In other words, if he wants to change his image, he can only choose to change to worse equipment, which will undoubtedly greatly reduce his combat effectiveness. At that time, it is very likely that, after he finds other players, he will not be able to cheat or sneak attack them. Unlike himself, who was a civilian in his previous life and relied on the board to support his combat effectiveness, many of the other players attracted by this huge bonus were martial arts champions or cold weapon fighting masters in their previous lives. With their rich combat experience and skills, they can undoubtedly exert strength far beyond the board. Unless his average attribute does not exceed 5. Traveling merchant. Ian suddenly thought of this profession. If he is a traveling merchant, even if the soul of the mountain or the sword of the god of the sword is put into his body, it will be useless, right? After all, he can't even lift their weapons. Just like Asshai before the Faceless Men training, she took her sewing needle to kill the hound, and the hound stood there and let her stab, but she couldn't stab it. So, is it possible for me to hunt a traveling merchant? As soon as this idea popped up in Ian's mind, clues were connected in his mind. First of all, it is not wrong that the traveling merchant is a popular start, and there must be a lot of players who choose the traveling merchant. Secondly, driven by the first blood task, the powerless traveling merchants will definitely not dare to meet with the agreed allies, because they have neither the capital to kill other players nor dare to trust the agreed allies. Unless they recruit mercenaries, but mercenaries happen to be the most popular start with the least obvious characteristics. Recruiting mercenaries is a very risky thing for them, and they even need to go around the places where mercenaries often appear. Therefore, the traveling merchants at the beginning are indeed good hunting targets for Ian, who have neither allies nor mercenaries. But the fact that the traveling merchants did not dare to join their allies also brought a problem. That is, Ian did not look for their clues. No, Ian shook his head immediately. There are still clues. In the case of being unable to gain points by killing other players, the only hope for the traveling merchants to gain points fell on the main quest. So what is the main quest of the traveling merchants? Perhaps Ian could not guess what the main quests of other professions were designed to be, but for the traveling merchants, no matter how their tasks were designed, they were nothing more than running business to make money. Moreover, the traveling merchants had a huge natural advantage at the beginning. That is, unlike the hired knights who had no money, they had a full 100 gold dragons at the beginning. For Ian, the task of earning 1000 gold dragons was almost a fantasy, but for the traveling merchants, if they operated properly, it was not completely impossible. Therefore, those merchants would most likely choose to run business after the start. If they were to run business, the Riverland where Ian was now was a good place. The Riverlands are well connected, and it is not in chaos, like it was after the War of the Five Kings. On the contrary, under the rule of the Tully family, the public security here is exemplary in the whole of Westeros, and there are very few bandits and horse bandits. It is obviously a good idea to trade in this area. The question is, what goods are better to trade? Furs from the north. This is a good idea. Collect furs at low prices in villages in the north and sell them in southern cities. This is a perfect trade route, because the price of furs in the north can be doubled in big cities in the south. If smuggling does not pay tariffs, it can be even higher. But there are some problems in terms of time. Westeros is too big. Even if you start in the north, it will take at least 2 months to transport goods to the south. If you start in the south, it will take even longer. For players who will be drawn by assassins in 2 months, fur trade may not be attractive. If furs don't work, then iron ore in the west. This thing also has high profits, and the trade route is shorter. The distance from the west border to the ideal shipping point in the riverlands or the river bay is less than 1/3 of the trade route in the north. Unfortunately, with only 1 cubic decimeter in the system backpack, the only way to load ore is by mule and truck. If the quantity is too small, it seems that the profit will not be raised. Moreover, iron ore may still be a government-run commodity. According to the feudal system of Westeros, it is almost impossible for any commodity to be government-run. Wait, government-run? Exclamation mark. Salt. Ian immediately became excited. Salt and iron have always been government-run in the ancient times of the Great Celestial Empire, but because of the feudal system in Westeros, the management rights of large and small territories were scattered in the hands of hundreds of lords. The royal family had no way to monopolize the salt and iron trade, but let the lords and merchants trade on their own. In the ancient times of the Great Celestial Empire, it was a capital crime to trade private salt, but it still couldn't stop people from flocking to it. The profit can be imagined. Let's ask, who among the merchant players, who start the game in the Riverlands, or near the Riverlands, can resist the temptation of salt? If they want to trade in salt, Ian flipped through the map of Westeros that he had already memorized in his mind. Chapter 10 The Old Blacksmith. Soon, he set his sights on the Salt Pans town, which was only 180 kilometers away from Hirenal where he was now. It was less than 3 days ride from there. It could be shortened to 2 days if the horse's condition was not taken into account. In such a short time, even those players who rushed to the meeting place at the beginning of the game might not meet each other. In other words, in the best case, he could even get the first kill. Even if he couldn't, as long as he successfully hunted down a player in the next 2 months, the 4 points alone would be enough for him to get rid of the threat of the assassination mechanism for a long time in the future. Wait, it's still not right. Although other professions would not find that their starting equipment was easy to be discovered, traveling merchants would definitely find it, so they would probably sell some of their assets, or buy more mules and horses, or even dismiss a few servants or recruit a few more farmers to help. In this case, how could he distinguish? After thinking for a while, Ian found the answer: the starting capital. Their starting capital of 100 gold dragons remained unchanged. Ian had studied it carefully when creating the character, and he clearly remembered that except for the final profession, the previous options had little effect on the starting funds. That is to say, even if the traveling merchant maximumed out the starting funds in the options, the money he had now would not exceed 110 gold dragons. As far as this money was concerned, if he wanted to earn 1000 gold dragons or even more in 2 months, he had to put all the money in. When I arrive at the Salt Pan town, I just need to find out the local salt price. Maybe the foreman will take kickbacks, so I can also find out the kickback ratio. In short, based on these 2 points, I can calculate the range of the merchant player's purchase volume, and then I can lock in the merchant suspected of being a player, based on the amount of goods they transport. Ian perfected the whole plan in his mind. Without wasting any more time, he quickly gathered all his equipment on the table. He planned to sell these things and his horse, then buy a machete and an old pack horse, and pretend to be an ordinary caravan guard, to go to the Salt Pan town. The caravan guard is actually one of the starting professions that players can choose, but due to its poor equipment, poor attributes, and lack of money, Ian classified it in the T3 sequence. Moreover, the initial equipment of the caravan guard is a short sword and leather armor, and Ian also distinguished it from them in these details. Anyway, with the pitiful strength of the traveling merchant, as long as he approaches the other party without arousing suspicion, he can be taken down steadily. The advantage is mine. Thinking of this, Ian began to estimate the value of his equipment. The whole set of armor can be sold for about 500 silver deer, and the half-hand sword can be sold for more than 200 silver deer. and his horse, which is still tied in the yard of the inn at the moment, according to the memory obtained through the background story, is a 5-year-old Hegian trained horse, which has just reached adulthood, and is at its peak. It should be able to sell for more than 750 silver deer, all added up to more than 1,300 silver deer. After completing the valuation, Ian put his full set of equipment into the bag and left. After arriving at the first floor, he asked the landlady about the location of the Hirenal blacksmith shop, paid 10 copper cents as accommodation fee, and then went to the stable in the backyard to lead his horse, and left the inn. Ian stopped outside the door of the inn. Less than half a meter in front of him, there stood an incredibly thick stone wall. The mossy stone wall was covered with dense cracks, and it looked like it had been through a lot of wind and rain. Ian took 2 steps forward and saw the other side of the stone wall through the cracks. It was a completely abandoned hole without a ceiling, with all kinds of rubble and garbage piled up in it. The flags hanging on the wall were so dusty that the emblems could not be seen at all, as if telling a distant history. The gloomy environment and the stench coming from the cracks made Ian palpitate. He did not stay any longer, but retracted his gaze and walked quickly towards the exit of the alley. Turning the corner, a north wind suddenly blew, and a strange cry sounded in the sky. Although Ian knew that this was the sound of air passing through the cracks in the stone of the Howling Tower, he still felt terrified, so he had to speed up his pace again, and gradually changed from a fast walk to a trot. The footsteps of people and horses echoed in the narrow alleys, forming a strange harmony with the crying in the air. After passing through several deserted streets with rocks everywhere, Ian finally came to the square where the blacksmith shop was located. What bad luck. Sell the equipment quickly and leave this damn place. He muttered and tied the horse to the wooden stake outside the door, then walked into the blacksmith shop. The blacksmith shop was very deserted, with only an old blacksmith and 2 young apprentices. The old blacksmith looked short and strong, and his brown hair had turned grey. When Ian walked in, he had just finished repeatedly hammering an iron sword, skillfully pulled it out, and then put it into a bucket of cold water next to him to quench it. The red-hot iron sword sank into the water, making a sizzling sound, and emitting wisps of white steam. "Young man, do you need anything?" The old blacksmith noticed Ian's arrival, and turned around to ask him. Ian looked around the room and quickly ruled out the possibility that there were other players here. First of all, he found out about this old blacksmith from the innkeeper's wife. According to the setting, that player characters appear out of thin air. This old blacksmith who has worked in Duskdale town for a lifetime must be a native. Then there are the 2 apprentices in their early teens, who are obviously below the minimum optional age. Ian breathed a sigh of relief, then opened the package, and took out his sword and a full set of old chainmail from it. "Uncle, I want to sell this set of equipment." Ian put the things on the table. The old blacksmith looked at Ian suspiciously, then carefully checked Ian's set of equipment. There were no cracks, and the surface wear was not serious. It would be profitable after repolishing. But, Eaton looked at Ian again, a little puzzled. "You should be a knight, right? You are still so young. Why do you want to sell equipment?" Ian is indeed very young, to be precise, too young. When Ian created the character, he tested it and found that age would not have any effect on the data, so he directly lowered the age to the minimum limit of 16 years old. The old blacksmith thought that a knight of this age should have a bright future, so he couldn't understand why he wanted to sell his equipment. "Because I was shot in the knee," Ian thought jokingly in his heart, but he still showed a bitter smile on his face and made up a story. "Because I'm tired of the life of a hedge knight. People say that we and the robber knights are 2 sides of the same sword. There is no honor at all. I don't want to continue this life." Chapter 11. You want to give me a sword? I don't mean to offend, but most of the hedge knights do have a bad reputation. Eaton shook his head. He always insisted on using the term hedge knight instead of the derogatory term hedge knight. "You are still so young. I believe there are still many opportunities." No, Ian was a little puzzled as to why the old blacksmith gave up a good business and instead tried to enlighten him, but he didn't want to get entangled with the other party, so he interrupted the old blacksmith directly. "I have decided that I will go to the wall to join the Night's Watch. That is the only place where I can gain honor. Becoming a Black Brother is my destination. It's a destined destination." The old blacksmith didn't know what he was thinking. Tears soaked the corners of his eyes. He didn't persuade Ian anymore, but said, "Good boy, may the 7 gods bless you." "The 7 gods bless us all," Ian responded. Old Eaton mentioned Ian's armor again. "This armor can be sold for 450 silver deer. And this sword can be sold for 180 silver deer, but..." The old blacksmith picked up Ian's half sword again and checked its degree of wear and tear. "In fact, I don't recommend that you sell the sword. Although the Night's Watch will provide all the equipment, it is not as handy as your own weapons. What do you think?" "I think you are really nosy. I think you misunderstood." Ian quickly made up a new excuse. "I sold my equipment not because the Night's Watch would provide it, so I took advantage of the Night's Watch. The main reason is that once I joined the Night's Watch, I can't stay to be filial to my parents. I want to leave them as much money as possible, so that I can leave with peace of mind." "Your parents are not nobles? It's obvious, isn't it?" "I don't mean to offend." The old blacksmith shook his head. "Since this is the money you plan to leave for your parents, then I won't make money from you. I can give you 550 silver deer for the armor, and I can open the sword for 200 silver deer." "Thank you, old sir." Ian couldn't help but feel a little happy. He didn't expect that a random excuse would help him get half a gold dragon. And the old blacksmith paused, as if he hesitated for a moment, but soon he made up his mind. "Since you are in great need of money, then I have a job for you." The old blacksmith's words surprised Ian a little. He didn't know why a blacksmith in Irenal would ask a strange hired knight to help him. Of course, no matter what the task was, he had no interest. But because he had just taken advantage of someone else's more than 100 silver deer, refusing outright would seem too blunt, so he tactfully reminded, "I'm no longer a hired knight." "Of course, I know, of course." The old blacksmith nodded quickly, and because of Ian's refusal, he believed his story of joining the Night's Watch a little more. "I'm not hiring you to fight for me, but since you are going to join the Night's Watch at the Wall, why don't you do me a favor and deliver something to me?" "What? You want to send me something?" Ian's eyes lit up. He was busy going to Saltburn Town to wait for someone, so of course he was not interested in all kinds of tasks. But sending things is different. "Once something is in my pocket, it's mine. Can you tell me in detail?" Ian replied with interest. "After you go to the Wall, I hope you can go to the Shadow Tower to find a ranger named Dowell, and then help me give him a heraldic sword." "So you want to give me a heraldic sword? You are really a good person." Ian nodded quickly. "So you agree?" "Of course, since it's on the way, I have no problem." The old blacksmith nodded, turned around and got behind a door. Ding. Optional tasks updated. Anna's voice sounded in his mind, and Ian quickly closed his eyes and logged into the system interface. Discover the triggering task, Shadowlion task description. The old blacksmith has a heraldic sword, and he wants you to bring it to Ranger Dovell in the Shadow Tower. Task reward. Unknown. Additional reward. Unknown. Accept. Consume 1 point. Reject. Seeing this task, Ian almost subconsciously wanted to click to accept. Because if the player's initial points are used to buy a money bag in the points mall, they can only buy 300 silver deer, and the value of a heraldic sword will be at least 3 gold dragons. It is obviously worthwhile to use 1 point to exchange for a heraldic sword at the beginning. But just when he was about to click, he suddenly had a bold idea. What would happen if he clicked to reject the task? After all, according to the organizer, this is a real world, so this old blacksmith is a real living person. Whether he will give the task to me should not be affected by the system at all. If the old blacksmith suddenly turns hostile because of his rejection of the task in the system, then this old blacksmith is not a living person, but an NPC with AI. Thinking of this, Ian moved his eyes away from the accept option and clicked reject next to it. After a while, the old blacksmith came out with a heraldic sword. This sword is made of fine steel and the craftsmanship is perfect. Eaton introduced while handing the sword to Ian. "It's just the sword of a friend of mine when I was young. Let's not talk about him." The old blacksmith shook his head. Sure enough, he didn't turn hostile. Ian was happy. Although he didn't hit a bug this time, he saved a point anyway. Ian took the sword from the old blacksmith. The first feeling was that it was heavy. It was the same length as his own sword, but it was slightly heavier. He pulled the sword out of the leather scabbard. The blade was slightly dark in color, and there were also many small cracks on the blade, but they were much smaller than those on his half sword. He gently touched the blade with his fingers and clearly felt its sharpness. Remember, give this sword to Ranger Dowell of the Shadow Tower, the old blacksmith reminded. He has blonde hair like you, and is about 35 years old. The old blacksmith paused and chuckled. Considering that he has been on the wall for more than 10 years, he may look older. In short, you must hand this sword to him in person. If he happens to be on a mission, when you go to the Shadow Tower, take the sword back, and wait for the next opportunity. Don't give the sword to other Night's Watchmen casually, the old blacksmith emphasized. Can I know why? Ian felt a little alert. Do you have something that no one else can hear, that I need to tell him? The old blacksmith obviously didn't expect Ian to ask this. He looked at Ian unexpectedly, and shook his head. No need. He will know everything when he sees the sword. Chapter 12 Bastard Sword. But this is a Lannister family's emblem sword. Ian gently stroked the golden lion head at the end of the hilt, which showed the domineering power to the fullest, and pulled the corner of his mouth. A sword of a black brother. Eaton interrupted Ian and said seriously, for the Night's Watch, the surname is meaningless. You mean this sword originally belonged to a Night's Watch? That's right. Then what is the relationship between this Night's Watch and that Dowell? You don't need to know this. The old blacksmith shook his head. If you accept this task, I can pay you a commission of 3 gold dragons, and after you join the Night's Watch, Dowell will also take care of you. I should have said before that he is a senior ranger. Damn. 3 gold dragons commission? Are you so rich? Ian subconsciously looked around, and the idea of whether to rob this blacksmith shop flashed through his mind. But the next second he gave up this crazy idea. This is the central square of Harrenhal. A lean camel is bigger than a horse. Even if the Heen family is in decline, a poor hired knight like him cannot shit on their heads. Okay. Ian sheathed the emblem sword in his hand, and hung it on his waist. He said seriously, deal. I promise to deliver the sword. I swear on my honor. I told you long ago that I have no honor. After getting Ian's reply, the old blacksmith smiled, and then he gave Ian 6 gold dragons, and 120 silver deer in person, of which 3 gold dragons were the commission for the sword delivery task, and the rest were the proceeds from Ian's equipment sales. Ian put all the coins into his bag, then walked out of the blacksmith shop, and led his horse again. Thinking back to the task just now, Ian couldn't help but smile ironically. Even if he didn't plan to go to Saltburn Town to squat for merchants, he wouldn't take such a weird task. Are you kidding? A blacksmith from Harrenhal inexplicably took out a Lannister emblem sword and asked him to hand it over to a night watchman. It is also said that this sword once belonged to a night watchman. There are too many doubts, including the relationship between the original owner of the sword and Dowell, their relationship with the Lannister family, and how the sword could have gone around and ended up in the hands of a blacksmith in Harrenhal when both the sword owner and Dowell were night watchmen. If Ian were sitting in front of the computer playing games, as a senior plot party, he might have to dig out all the secrets here. As for now, he thought his brain was not broken. Secrets are often accompanied by dangers, especially this is a secret related to the Lannister family. He is worried that he might be buried with a family secret without knowing it. Shaking his head, Ian turned his attention back to the emblem sword that he had just temporarily kept. This is a real big harvest. Apart from anything else, this Lannister emblem sword is obviously worth a lot of money. Judging from Ian's experience, its cost should be more than 10 gold dragons, and if it is sold, its value should be at least twice the cost. The only question is how to sell this sword. Ian fell into deep thought again. There is no doubt that in addition to the excellent craftsmanship of this sword, the most valuable part is the golden lion head that is carved so vividly that it can be called a work of art. But this thing is the emblem of the Lannister family, the richest and most powerful family in the whole Westeros. In this era, when the emblem basically represents identity, there has almost never been a case of a noble forging the emblem of another family. Naturally, no one would be crazy enough to buy a Lannister emblem sword. In other words, although this sword is valuable, it is extremely hot. Maybe that's why the old blacksmith dared to hand the sword to me like this? Ian couldn't help thinking. He thought about why the old blacksmith believed his question so easily. His conclusion at the time was that the old blacksmith believed the story he made up about going to join the Night's Watch. After all, from the old blacksmith's perspective, a normal hired knight would not sell armor and would not be so idle as to cheat a blacksmith like him, so he was almost certain that Ian was telling the truth. Why should he worry about a good and honest knight who swore by his own honor, voluntarily wore black clothes, and left all his money to his parents before leaving, and had sworn by his own honor, and had left all his money to his parents, and had dared to hand over the sword to him? Now it seems that the reason why the old blacksmith dared to hand over the sword to him was because he was sure that he could not sell the sword. Can I only melt this lion head? No, if it is pure gold, it's fine, but if it is gold plated, wouldn't it be useless if it is melted? Ian denied another idea. Wait, why the hell do I have to sell the sword? Ian suddenly held his forehead. Isn't my most important goal now to change the opening characteristics and disguise myself as an identity that is absolutely impossible to be a player? Just ask, what identity in this world is less likely to be a player than a knight of the Lannister family? This gilded emblem sword is obviously the work of a senior blacksmith in the castle. Even within the Lannister family, only people with a certain status are qualified to wear it. This means that I have mastered the key props to play a Lannister at this moment. Next, he only needs to get himself a set of exquisite clothes, and then change to a taller horse, and he can perfectly play the role of a Lannister knight. Then why is he still playing the role of a caravan guard? No, there are still flaws. Ian shook his head immediately. I'm not facing the natives, but the players. If I rashly disguise myself as a member of the Lannister family, and I'm asked about the names of my parents, it will be a lot of trouble to make up a lie. Although the other party may not ask. What if he asks, refusing to answer with an angry face? Wouldn't this just add suspicion to myself? So, is there any way to avoid this from happening? Looking at the emblem sword in his hand again, Ian smiled and he had an idea. This is a half-hand sword. The half-hand sword is the most common sword type in Western film and television works. It has the three characteristics of the thrust of the knight's sword, the slash of the two-handed sword, and the handy of the broadsword, so it is also called a hybrid sword. So why don't I pretend to be a hybrid? After all, who would be more secretive about their origins than a bastard? Normally, as long as you introduce yourself as Jon Snow or Hyun. Note 1. No one will ask about your origins, unless he wants to use a sword to have the next conversation with you. In the common language of Westeros, which is actually English, bastard and bastard are the same word, and talking to a bastard about his origins is not much different from calling his mother a bitch in person. This perfectly avoids the possibility of other players trying to test their specific identities. Moreover, there is no bastard in the player's origin selection. According to the inertial thinking that players should use their own background stories to disguise their identities, it is difficult for players to associate a bastard with a player. Ian Heshan, the bastard of a big man in the Lannister family. Because it concerns his father's reputation, I cannot say his name. Thinking of this, Ian turned and walked towards a tailor shop next door. Note 1. The illegitimate children of nobles in Westeros are named after the place where they were born. The corresponding relationship is Flowers Riverland, Hill Westerland, Picayune Islands, River Wen Riverlands, Sand Dawn, Snow North, East Standay, Storm Stormlands, Water Crownland. Chapter 13. The Stables at Erenhill. A young blonde nobleman walked out of the tailor's shop. He was wearing a dark purple hunting coat made of fine brocade and velvet, with a cape made of silver and soft red gold hanging on his left shoulder. The rough and coquettish large lapel on his chest showed the distinct layers of the two fine fabrics of the lining and the surface of the clothes. He wore a gilded belt with a floral pattern around his waist, and an exquisite Lannister emblem sword hung on it. This set of hunting clothes was said to have once belonged to a sworn knight of the House of Harren, but now it is sold in this tailor's shop directly under Lady Harren. It can only be said that fate is fickle. Since the House of Harren was in fiaft with Erenhill in 281 AC, the House of Harren was once one of the most prominent families in the Riverlands and the most powerful vassal in the Riverlands. In the year they got Erenhill, Earl of Harren held a grand tournament here, and the then Crown Prince Rhaegar Targaryen, Dragon Mother's eldest brother, won the lance tournament championship. but then he spurred his horse past his wife, Princess Celia of the House of Dawn Martel, and placed the crown woven with winter roses, symbolizing the Queen of Love and Beauty, on the lap of Lyanna Stark, who was then engaged to Robert Baratheon, Duke of Storm's End, now the king on the Iron Throne, causing a huge scandal. Soon after, Lyanna was suspected of being kidnapped by Prince Rhaegar, and Lyanna's father and brother were successively buried at the hands of the Mad King Aerys Targaryen II, because they wanted to seek justice for this. The following year, in 282 AC, the War of the Usurper, that changed the pattern of the Westeros continent broke out. Jon Arryn, the Duke of the Eyrie and the Vale, raised the banner of rebellion, and nominated Robert Baratheon as the leader of the uprising. He united the Starks in the north, the Tullys in the Riverlands, and the Baratheons in the Stormlands. It took 2 years to overthrow the Targaryen dynasty that had ruled Westeros for nearly 300 years. The Heen family of Erenhal lost most of their power because they mistakenly stood on the side of the royalists. To this day, the ruler of Erenhal, Countess Heen, can only activate a small part of the halls of Erenhal, and her troops are less than 100 people. Many weapons, armor, clothing, and jewelry that once belonged to the knights and ladies of the Heen family are now sold in these industries directly under Countess Heen to subsidize the increasingly inadequate finances of the Heen family. In order to buy this well-fitting hunting suit and belt, Ian spent 5 gold dragons and 180 silver deer, praising the old blacksmith. In short, in order to make his image look more like a real noble, Ian has spent most of his funds. Therefore, he who still needs to change a good horse has become a little stretched. Leading his horse to the stables of Erenhal, Ian began to think about whether he could cheat and borrow a good horse from Lady Heen's stable manager with the identity of a Lannister noble knight. After all, the Lannisters are the richest family in Westeros, and they have always had the motto of a Lannister must pay his debts. As long as he offers a high return, he might be able to borrow a good horse. After showing the guard of the stables his identity as a Lannister knight, Ian successfully obtained permission to enter the stables for a visit. Walking into the empty stables of Erenhal, Ian suddenly felt a sense of loneliness. This is a very large building in itself. Judging from its area and the number of horse troughs, it may not be a problem to accommodate 1,000 horses. But now it seems that less than 1/10 of it is still in use. About 30 horses are kept in a corner, which is regarded as the last proof that the Heen family of Erenhal still exists. Ian once visited the stables of an ancient castle in Europe. According to the tour guide, in that stable, there used to be special rooms for special hunting clothes, riding boots, fine wine, vinegar, olives, oil ointments, etc. There were also special rooms for storing horse armor, horse robes with coats of arms, hunting bows and other weapons. In the area dedicated to war horses, there is not only high quality wheatus food, but also slots for oil lamps. Every winter, the stable manager will light oil lamps to keep the horses warm. Such a stable is more like a small military camp, where noble knights can arm themselves at any time and rest in the stable. However, these functions have obviously been lost here. Ian's arrival attracted the attention of a groom who was pouring water into the trough. He quickly stopped what he was doing and trotted to Ian. "Hey, that family, this sir." He just opened his mouth and recognized Ian's extraordinariness from his clothes, so he quickly changed his words. "Sorry, sir, this is the private stable of the Countess of Heen, and outsiders are prohibited from entering." "Of course, I know where this is, but I still came in, didn't I?" Ian deliberately turned sideways, as if he was observing a brown trained horse next to him. In fact, he showed the side of himself with a sword hanging on it to the groom, hoping that he could see it more clearly. "Oh, yes, sir," the groom replied in a daze. He then remembered that there was a team of guards outside the stable, but the knight in front of him still came in. Does this mean that the other party has actually obtained permission? "I'm Sir Lucian Lannister, son of Sir Damian Lannister." Ian made up an identity for himself. When facing the natives who were not players, he could play more freely. "I wonder what you want to do here, sir?" the groom immediately asked respectfully when he heard Ian's name. Although he had never heard of Sir Lucian Lannister, it did not affect his bowing to a knight. "I want to temporarily foster my horse here." Ian did not reveal his purpose directly. He pointed to the trained horse he was leading. Of course, I will pay for it. Of course, sir, it is my honor. I promise to take good care of your horse. The groom quickly agreed. It was one of their jobs to help the noble knights passing by take care of the horses, and the fees paid by the knights were usually higher than the maintenance fees of the horses. At the same time, I need to borrow a horse from you, Ian said at this time. Of course, no problem, sir, please take a look. The groom stretched out his hand and led Ian to the stable. He did not doubt that the knight was a liar. After all, his own horse was left here, wasn't it? I'm going to Maiden Spring Town to participate in the hunting held by William Newton, Ian said, while looking at the horses in the fence. Most of the horses here are just ordinary riding horses, and there are only a few real large war horses. Soon, he fell in love with a white horse at first sight. Ian estimated that its shoulder height was over 1.65 meters. Compared with it, the Hegian horse he was leading, which was less than 1.4 meters tall at the shoulder, could only be described as petite and cute. This is it. How is it? Chapter 14. A Lannister must pay his debts. The groom looked in the direction of Ian's finger and stuttered. Oh, sir, that's Lady Riverrun's mount, a high quality war horse bred from a cross between a tall river horse and a Dornish sand horse known for its endurance, and the price is twice that of an ordinary war horse. The price of a war horse is about 20 times that of a farm horse, 10 times that of a draft horse, and 3 times that of a trained horse, which means that the price of the horse Ian wants to borrow is about 6 times that of the horse Ian left here. It's just right for me, isn't it? Ian smiled instead. You know, you can't go hunting without a good horse, and I'm going to win the favor of Miss Ilano this time. Sir, oh, that's not okay. I don't have the power to make such a decision. I must ask the butler for this matter. The groom shook his head quickly. The groom's voice was so loud that it startled another younger groom who was working at the manger on the other side, and the man ran over quickly after hearing the words. He didn't rush to speak, but just looked at the two of them, as if he hadn't figured out the situation yet. It's just borrowing a horse. What's there to ask for permission? Ian frowned. As for Lady Heen's mount, how old is Lady Heen? Can she still ride a horse? Not to mention such a tall horse. At her age, Dengzi would fall down when riding a bicycle, and she still wants to ride a horse. This Lady Heen certainly can't ride a horse. Her last horse was never ridden by her from the time it was chosen, until it died of old age. But Lady Heen can choose not to ride, but there must be a stable. This is the face of the Earl of Harrenhal. I'm just borrowing it for a week, and I will return the horse immediately after the hunting is over. If there is any problem with the horse during this period, I will compensate you at the original price. Haven't you heard of the motto? A Lannister must pay his debts. Sir, please don't make it difficult for me. Besides, isn't my horse still with you? This horse has been with me for many years. By the way, you don't really suspect that I want to defile your horse. Then you guessed right. Okay, then I won't make it difficult for you. You can report to the stable steward now. I'll wait for you here. Ian took out a gold dragon. By the way, tell him that this is the reward for borrowing the horse. The young groom who had been standing by and not speaking seemed to have finally reacted and walked to Ian in an instant. Sir, the steward is not in Harrenhal at the moment, but I think he will definitely agree after knowing that you want to borrow the horse, so I'll take you to try the horse first, and we'll report to him later. He smiled flatteringly at Ian. The old groom looked at him in confusion. Leave everything to me, father, don't worry about it. The young groom shook his head at his father. Count Hassan is old and has no heirs. Harrenhal has not held a tournament or hunting for many years, and the horses in the stable have hardly been used. Because the lord doesn't care, the stable steward has not even gone to check the stables in recent years. There have always been only him and his father working here. This knight will return the horse in a week. Who can find out in such a short time? As for the knight not returning the horse, how is it possible? Lannisters must repay their debts. Even a 3-year-old child knows this. Gold dragon? What gold dragon? I did this just to make it easier for this knight. It doesn't matter whether it's a gold dragon or not. Whatever you want. Ian said as if he didn't care, but he was relieved in his heart. If the other party really asked the stable manager to come, He might have to give up this white horse and borrow an ordinary war horse instead. Although that would not affect his disguise as a certain Lannister knight, it was not so perfect after all. Ian threw the gold coin into the air, and the young groom quickly caught it. After carefully checking it, he put it in his pocket. "Here, sir." The young groom smiled, and led out Lady Heen's mount. Because it had been whipped long ago, its character was quite docile. With his intermediate riding skills, Ian tamed the horse, which had not resisted, in just 1 minute. My old friend, Ian, who was riding on the white horse, looked back at the old groom, who was still struggling. "I promise you, if I'm lucky enough to win the favor of the Countess of Alano, and marry the heir of Maiden Springtown, I will invite you to Maiden Springtown, to be the head of the stable." Ha 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 ha. After saying that, Ian rode his horse, and swaggered out of the stable. The guards outside the door just glanced at him, and made way for him without any questioning. Until Ian disappeared from their sight, a guard suddenly spoke, and looked at his companion. "Did you feel that the knight became taller when he left?" "What nonsense is this?" The companion did not understand what he meant. "No, nothing." The guard scratched his head. "Maybe it's an illusion." Ian certainly didn't know the guard's doubts. He once again returned to the inn where he started, bought 2 pots of ale and a set of dry food, and then left Irennal from the north gate, and embarked on a journey to Saltpans. To the north of Irennal is a large piece of fertile farmland. It is precisely because of this fertile land that the owner of Irennal was once considered the richest man in Westeros. If there were no curse, this would be the most ideal fiefdom in the entire Westeros. Passing through the winding streams and the sunny fields, Ian began to see rolling hills and low bushes. He slowed down his speed a little, and continued to move towards the direction of the King's Road. According to Ian's original estimate, it would take him 3 days to reach Saltpans, but after changing this horse, if he speeds up, he can shorten the journey to 1.5 days. Of course, he won't do that. After all, even the best horse's endurance is nothing compared to its own explosive power. A horse with a speed of 40 km per hour can indeed run 40 km in an hour, but it can only run less than 60 km in 2 hours. It takes 5 to 7 hours to run 100 km, and this must be a horse that has been trained for a long time. If the horse usually lives a leisurely life, then it is basically at the end of its strength here. If it continues to run for another 20 kilometers, it may be killed. Although the horses in Mrs. Ian's stable have the innate advantage of bloodline, eat the best food, and receive the best care, Ian dare not overestimate their actual amount of exercise. Therefore, it is Ian's best choice to let it trot at a speed of 10 kilometers per hour, while fully resting in the middle of the journey, and strive to arrive at Yanchang Town before the sun sets tomorrow. Anyway, Yanchang Town is a port town, and the entire town is not wrapped in the city wall. He doesn't have to worry about being blocked by the city gate when he arrives in the middle of the night. At noon, Ian took a break in the grove beside the King's Road, and had a piece of white bread for lunch. He only moistened his throat with beer twice. He didn't want to be affected by alcohol in this world, where he could fight at any time. "What?" you asked him, why he didn't drink water? In this era, when people didn't have the habit of boiling water before drinking, he would rather choose this low alcohol beer. At least he could guarantee that it was a clean liquid. After a short break at noon, Ian set out on his journey again. Not interested in appreciating the scenery along the way, Ian just hurried north silently. Suddenly, Ian pulled the reins hard, stared at the end of the road, and murmured, "Where are we going?" If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story, and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 15 Encounter. Just after the intersection of Kingdom Avenue with the East-West River Avenue and Valley Avenue, about 60 kilometers away from Irennal, to the north is the Trident River. This is the territory of Earl Harroway Town. Ian made a judgment. At the end of Ian's vision, there is a small well salt mine. Next to the woods outside the mine is a caravan loading goods. The foreman in the mine is directing the workers to move bags of salt onto horse-drawn carts. And this caravan is exactly the scale that Ian remembered. 4 old horses, 2 carts, 7 mules, 4 servants and a thin young businessman. Although I don't know why this player is stupid enough not to change the initial characteristics, it is self-evident that Ian met such a caravan here. Fate is really wonderful. Looking at this scene from a distance, Ian's hand holding the sword couldn't help but tighten a little. Ian's expected hunting is to squat in advance, find out the terrain and the opponent's strength, and then plan to deceive and sneak attack, rather than fight this kind of unprepared encounter. But at this moment he had no choice. He was originally on the King's Road, so he naturally did not hide his figure. So when he found this caravan, the other party naturally found him. If he stayed on the road to the north, he could avoid any suspicion and stray from this group of people, but it would be strange if he wanted to turn back after he was mentally prepared. In order to approach the merchant player without suspicion, he could only pretend to go to the salt mine for something and drive his horse directly over. Fortunately, my disguise is good enough. No one should suspect me. Ian glanced at his emblem sword and regained some confidence. Ian made up his mind, and then he put on the arrogant demeanor of the nobles that he often saw in British dramas in his previous life, rode his horse to the left, and left the King's Road, and went directly to the salt mine not far away. However, before he took a few steps, he felt his heartbeat suddenly accelerated. Don't show your weakness, he quickly warned himself in his heart. Ian realized that he had overestimated himself. Although he could talk about the so-called hunting plan, it was nothing more than empty talk without risk or practice. When it comes to talking nonsense, Ian, who had fought many battles on Bahu, did not think he would lose to any keyboard warrior on the internet. But when he was really facing this life and death adventure, he found that his reason was unable to suppress the tension in his heart. He could not even tell for a moment whether he was afraid of killing or afraid of death. It was only a few dozen meters, but Ian felt that he had walked for a century. There are only 4 servants with no fighting ability, no mercenaries by his side, and he is defenseless. I only need to approach him without arousing suspicion, and I can chop off his head with a sword and then walk away. Ian kept giving himself psychological hints. There is no risk. I don't have to be afraid. Suppressing the fear in his heart, Ian drove his horse slowly forward while observing the situation in the mine ahead. Soon, he found a clue. The salt miners and the merchant servants were loading salt onto the carts slowly and no one was urging them. This was obviously a problem. Ian suddenly had an idea and thought of a trial plan. Then he passed through the gate of the salt field, bypassed the cart team blocking the gate, and came to the foreman and the merchant player, who is the owner of the salt mine. Looking at the foreman who was coming to meet him, Ian put on an arrogant expression and asked him in a condescending manner, "It's Sir Lucas Root, who is also the Lord of the Earl of Harroway, sir." The foreman looked at the sword on Ian's waist, obviously knowing that the other party was extraordinary, lowered his head, and said respectfully, "What is the current trading situation of your salt mine? Do you have a fixed long-term supply contract?" "No, sir. All the salt in our mine is sold to the passing caravans." The miner explained respectfully on the surface, but he was complaining in his heart. "It's none of your business. This is the Riverland. You Lannisters are too nosy, right? Very good. I plan to buy this salt well. Show me your mine." This is Ian's plan. In this way, he can not only walk around for the purpose of inspecting the salt mine and explore the surrounding terrain, but also force the merchant player to take the initiative to deal with him. After all, the other party wants to buy salt, and he is about to become the new owner of the salt mine. On the contrary, if a high-handed Sir Lannister takes the initiative to greet a lowly merchant, it would be too strange, isn't it? Ian didn't look at the merchant player more during the whole process. He knew that this would minimize the other party's vigilance. The foreman immediately looked embarrassed. The young earl is now the attendant of Sir Andre Cholton. He is not in the fiefdom. Everything in the town is managed by the mayor, including this salt mine. And the mayor is not qualified to decide whether to sell this salt mine? Ian raised his eyebrows. "Yes, sir." "Then I want all your goods now," Ian said without further ado. "You return their payment to them and have someone bring the salt back to me." Ian pointed to the merchant player in the convoy blocking the gate of the salt field. "It doesn't matter if I can't buy this mine. I can still force him to come to me if I rob his goods." Ian thought to himself. This The foreman broke out in a cold sweat. Do you need a lot of salt now? We still have some left in our warehouse. Take a look. Do I need to explain to you? Ian interrupted the foreman rudely. You said you have no right to decide on the purchase of the mine, and you also made excuses when I bought salt. Do you have any objections to the Lannister family? The foreman was immediately frightened and had to look at the merchant for help. The thin merchant was also a little at a loss for a moment and had to look at the fat follower beside him. Seeing this scene, Ian narrowed his eyes immediately. He said our merchant dared to drive the initial equipment to the salt mine to buy goods, and the workers in the mine were not in a hurry. It turned out that this guy exchanged his clothes with his servants. He was fishing here. He knew that the merchant's starting equipment had eye-catching features, so he deliberately exposed this flaw and waited for other players to hunt him. This is indeed a good place for fishing, because this place is too eye-catching, located north of the intersection of King's Road, River Road and Valley Road, and south of the ferry of the Trident River. As long as there are players entering the Riverland from the north, the Crownland or the Valley, or going from the Riverland to these three places, they will definitely pass by here and find him. But he only has a few rubbish servants. Why does he think he can kill people by hiding? Chapter 16 The Daring Fisherman. Ian couldn't figure it out. It was hard to say for other starting professions, but if a hired knight with armor and trained horses encountered such a caravan in full state, he would undoubtedly be able to deal with them. However, since Ian was now unarmored, he didn't dare to take risks. While Ian was thinking, the player also exchanged opinions with his servant, and the thin fake merchant came to Ian. Ian also pretended not to notice their little movements and didn't speak. I'm Damon, a traveling merchant from Brightwater City in the River Bay. I don't care who you are. Ian interrupted him. I only care about this batch of salt. Excuse me, who are you? Sir Ian Heshan. Ian smiled. He didn't pretend to be an orthodox Lannister in front of the player, like he did in front of the groom. After all, it would be much more troublesome to make up a lie than a bastard. At this time, the benefits of pretending to be a bastard are very obvious. As long as the other party doesn't want to offend you to death, they won't ask any more questions. Perhaps you haven't heard of me, but this batch of goods is wanted by Sir Kevin, brother of Tywin Lannister, Duke of Casterly Rock. I suggest you don't have any ideas. Ian warned, pulling the tiger skin. Other thin merchant was obviously fooled again. This was obviously beyond the scope of what the leader told him to say just now, so he looked at the fat servant again. The fat man was a little crazy, so he had to step forward quickly and explain, my lord, my name is Haru, my cousin is not very smart, and I usually make decisions on matters in the caravan. It was a very reasonable explanation. Ian sneered in his heart. If I was really the illegitimate son of some noble, I would have been fooled by you. I'm not a lord, I'm just a knight. Ian rejected the merchant's flattery in a dignified manner. Maybe it was just a slip of the tongue. Anyway, you talk to me. Give me this batch of goods. What compensation do you want? I can decide to pay you 3 times the price, even if you ship the goods to the south and disperse them in batches. The profit will not exceed this. Unless you want to evade taxes. By the way, you should not have thought about evading taxes, right? Ian was talking nonsense while thinking about whether he could get away safely if he drew his sword and killed the merchant now. The conclusion is no, because from the slow speed of the salt mine workers, it is difficult for Ian to say that the foreman has not been bribed by the other party. If he simply kills the merchant among a few garbage servants and then escapes, there is a certain chance, but if these miners are also bribed by them, it will be difficult for him to leave. After all, the miners of this era have always been a semi-gangster gang. Without some skills, it is impossible to control such a high-profit place. For the miners, knocking your head is no more difficult than knocking the stone in the well. Moreover, the merchant's convoy was blocking the gate of the mine. If he wanted to leave the mine, he had to circle around the convoy, like he did when he came in. This undoubtedly increased the risk of being shot down by the salt workers. Across from Ian, Haru was also thinking about it. He was not here to make a profit from the salt. He came for the huge sum of 3,000 gold dragons and the S-level NPC. Who knew that a stupid illegitimate child would appear halfway? If he gave up the opportunity to hunt here and went back to the saltfield town to make arrangements, the time would be too hasty. Now there are 100 players thinking about how to grab the first blood. Time is everything. Of course it's impossible. We are legal merchants. My family has been good citizens for 3 generations. We will never do anything illegal. Haru lowered his head respectfully. Oh. So the 4 generations have committed crimes? Otherwise, you should say that they have been good citizens for generations. No, no, no. Haru waved his hands quickly. I don't even know my great-grandfather. I'm an honest person and I will never say anything I'm not sure about. Damn it. You are an honest man, and Asshai is a model village. I don't have time to listen to your jokes. Just tell me, can my proposal be closed? No, 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 of course not. Hiruai shook his head again. Just let the salt mine return the principal we have paid. Please say hello to Sir Kevin for me. Enough. Who do you think you are? When did Sir Kevin need a pariah to say hello? Ian couldn't help but sneered, and said in the arrogant tone of Lannister, I said I will compensate you 3 times. Just take it. Don't try to take advantage of this opportunity to build any relationship. Hiruai's face rose. He had just said this out of habit, completely forgetting that his current identity as a businessman was not qualified to build a relationship with the Lannister family. After being scolded by Ian, he reacted and had to squeeze out an awkward smile. He didn't dare to feel angry, because he knew that it was natural for the nobles of this era to have this attitude towards civilians, even if that guy was just a bastard. Ian looked at Haru, overcoming his nervousness. I ruined your fishing plan. You can use whatever tricks you have. Soon, Ian noticed that Haru gave the foreman of the salt well a wink. His guess was right. The other party had bribed the foreman long ago. Fortunately, I didn't act rashly just now. Then Sir Ian, please go to the town to rest first. We will start counting the inventory now. You can take away all the goods tomorrow morning. The foreman walked to Ian and said respectfully. It turned out that he wanted to lead me away so that he could continue to squat here. Ian's eyes flickered. Take me to see the goods first. Our family's transport team will be here soon. My people will help us. We will try to complete the loading before tonight. By the way, Haru, move your team away first so that it doesn't block our position. Ian looked at Haru and said his true purpose. Haru's convoy just blocked the gate of the salt field. As long as he moved these carts away, he could rush out immediately after killing him. Okay, sir, I'm happy to serve you. Haru bowed. Hearing the news that the Lannisters' transport team was coming, he gave up the idea of colliding with this illegitimate child. Anyway, these Lannisters would leave after pulling salt today. At worst, he would fill the bags with sand and continue fishing here tomorrow. So Haru began to order the servants to move the carts. Seeing this, Ian's nerves were tense all over his body, ready for a thunderbolt. Now no one here doubts him. He only needs to take advantage of the gap when everyone did not react after killing Haru to rush out. With the strength of his horse, no one here can catch up with him. However, just as he watched Haru's carts about to leave the original place, the sound of arrows piercing the air and a low scream suddenly sounded. Chapter 17, Assault. Ian turned around suddenly and found that the fake merchant had an arrow half entered under his left shoulder blade, near his heart. He fell to the ground with a pale face, and his blue brocade robe was soaked with scarlet blood. The fake merchant was twitching all over, but none of his companions cared about him. Catch him. Haru gave an order, and his servants and the salt workers scattered nearby drew their hidden iron swords from under the salt bags on the mule cart, and rushed out to the woods next to them. Then several free riders who came out of nowhere chased in the direction where someone in the woods had just shot arrows. Haru's eyes flashed with excitement and bloodthirstiness, and he had completely ignored Ian's existence. But this was obviously not a good opportunity for Ian to attack him, because at this moment, several swordsmen dressed as salt workers were gathering around Haru with a covetous look. These salt workers were all disguised as mercenaries. He actually dared to recruit mercenaries? So bold? A subtle surprise flashed across Ian's face. Then he realized that his plan was disrupted. Ian was not afraid of the fake salt workers' mercenary identities being exposed, because even if these people were mercenaries, his plan could have been successful. As long as there were no mules and carts between him and the gate of the salt mine, it would only take a few seconds for him to rush out of the mine, after he suddenly killed people, and the outside of the mine was the King's Road. Even if there were a few hired cavalry hidden outside, what would it matter? They were riding a group of river horses. The white horse under his crotch was a selected descendant of the Dawn Sand Horse, which was famous for its endurance. Although it had run nearly 60 kilometers, it basically trotted at a speed of just over 10 kilometers per hour and rested for an hour and a half at noon. Ian could clearly feel that its physical exhaustion was not serious. In this state, as long as he rushed out of the mine, those river horses would not be able to catch up, even if they had wings. Forget about having wings. The horses of the Dowdy don't have wings. So what's the big deal about you having wings? Right? Anyway, those mercenary cavalrymen have no chance of catching up with him. Unfortunately, now Ian looked at Haru. Another player suddenly made a move, so that the guy was now surrounded by 4 more heavily guarded swordsmen, and he completely lost the opportunity to sneak attack him. What's going on? Ian could only pretend to be calm and asked, pretending to be confused about what was happening now. Oh, sir, you don't know. Haru's tone became cheerful with the appearance of the prey, and he didn't care about Ian's attitude. Anyway, he had already caught his fish, so whoever wanted the salt from the salt mine was none of his business. No way, no way. Could it be that someone would really be interested in the profit of these few bags of salt? I have an enemy who has been chasing me for a long time, Haru explained. He still did not doubt Ian's identity, so I set a trap here. Don't worry, sir, I will leave soon. It doesn't matter if it is a reasonable explanation. Other people's personal grudges still happen in the Riverlands. It is not his turn as a bastard of the Lannister family to take care of it, so Haru's explanation became casual. As for whether the bastard believes it or not, you eat shit. I lied to you. Come and beat me. So you are the real owner of this caravan? After a full set of drama, Ian still pretended to be surprised. Yes, sir. Haru nodded with a smile. His attitude was contemptuous and submissive. Not long after, a commotion came. It turned out that the mercenaries who went to capture the assassin came back. A free rider tied a man wearing an ordinary short shirt with a horse rope and a bloody face and ran towards this side. The man was obviously a Brotherhood hunter. It was unknown whether he came to the salt mine on purpose to hunt merchants or simply saw Haru when passing by and acted rashly. Ian was more inclined to the latter. This guy could shoot an arrow through the heart of the imposter from 120 yards away, which meant that he must have been a master of archery in his previous life. But he dared to act without fully understanding the situation first, so he fell directly into Haru's trap, which showed that his brain was not so good. The Brotherhood hunter ran wildly, trying hard to keep up with the rider, who was leading him with a rope, but as the horse ran faster, he finally fell to the ground and was dragged all the way. His body was rubbed bloody by the gravel, leaving a clear blood mark on the ground. Seeing the victorious free rider getting closer and closer, the wine stains on his beard gradually became clearer, and Ian's mood became heavier and heavier. He glanced at Haru again. The 4 swordsmen were still on guard. They were not wearing armor like himself. Ian was not sure that he could kill Haru and get away unscathed under their protection. As more than a dozen other mercenaries returned one after another, Ian knew that he had completely missed the opportunity to kill Haru. Forget it. He didn't find out my identity. I only need to do nothing to leave alive. Ian was backing down. Even if the first blood mission was gone, with my disguise, I would still have a chance to squat other merchants in Salt Pan Town. As long as I could get 4 points, I would have a foothold in this world. People should not be too greedy. But when he looked up, his eyes fell on the Brotherhood hunter who was tied up and escorted to Haru by 2 people. Haru raised the dagger, but stopped before stabbing the Brotherhood hunter's neck. His hands trembled slightly, and he was obviously hesitating. Do you need me to do it for you, sir? A mercenary asked. No, no. Haru shook his head quickly. Do it for you? Are you kidding? If you do it for me, I will lose 2 points. But Haru held up the dagger and still couldn't stab it. Would you hesitate too? Ian smiled bitterly in his heart. It turned out that you are also a player from a legal society, so you can't help but have a natural fear of killing. Ian was thinking, and his eyes fell on the Brotherhood hunter again. He is so close to me. At this moment, Ian had a bold idea in his heart that even surprised himself. Less than 2 meters, including the length of the arm and the length of the sword. It is just the distance for me to stab with a sword. Now their attention is not on me. I can grab this head, as long as I draw my sword. I only need a reason. Ian's eyes narrowed into a slit, and the only thing left in his field of vision was the captured player. Chapter 18 What Brotherhood? After the bounty mission is completed, other players will be notified in a delayed manner. Even if I rob his head, he will not know that I'm a player. And they certainly dare not kill a Lannister easily, especially a Lannister who is doing a mission for a big shot. What's more, as a Lannister, why should I worry about not being able to turn these mercenaries after getting a bounty of 3,000 gold dragons? Brotherhood. The moment Ian thought of an excuse in his mind, he became bold and rushed to the front before Heru cut the throat of the Brotherhood hunter with a dagger and pierced the prisoner's chest with a stab. Heru's eyes widened and looked at Ian in shock. The mercenaries around him were also in a state of confusion, not understanding what Ian meant by this move. The prompt sound of the mission completion in his mind made Ian sober up from the madness of that moment. He was a little unbelievable that he actually took action. At the same time, he found that the string that was tight in his heart finally loosened. It turned out that he was not afraid of killing, but simply afraid of death. Ian raised his slightly trembling arm to wipe the blood splashed on his face. The scalding temperature and strong fishy smell made his stomach churn. It was the smell of rust and blood. But he had to suppress the urge to vomit because he knew that his play was not over yet. Ian knew that the mechanism that only the winner could go back alive determined that he was not qualified to pretend to be noble, and the rhythm of this mission that raced against time did not leave him enough time for awakening and transformation. From the moment he crossed into this world, he was no longer Xia Ze, but Ian, and he could only be Ian. Pulling out his sword from the corpse that was leaning on him, Ian looked around at the people around him with scowled eyes, then pushed the corpse forward and swung the sword at the neck of the corpse. Unfortunately, the sword only penetrated a few centimeters into the shoulder blade and failed to cut off the head as he wished. "Sir, what are you doing?" Heru asked, suppressing the anger in his heart. "Members of the Brotherhood without banners," Ian said furiously, with endless hatred in his tone. "If it weren't for these bastards, I wouldn't be a bastard now." Ian turned to the mercenaries around Haruai and growled, "My father's original wife is dead. If they hadn't attacked my father and seriously injured him, my father should have married my mother long ago, and I would have been a dignified Lannister, instead of the lowly Hezhan." The mercenaries retreated one after another. They were shocked by Ian's momentum. If it wasn't necessary, who would be willing to offend a crazy Lannister? And now they obviously didn't need to do so. After all, their employer Haruai hired them to kill the enemy who threatened him, and now there are other people who also have a grudge against this person. Killing him first will have no effect at all, right? Anyway, the employer himself couldn't do it, right? Brotherhood without banners? Haru's face suddenly became extremely ferocious, and he roared loudly, "Kill him! Kill him for me! Catch him! I will double your team's commission!" Haru roared angrily, waving his hand holding the dagger in the air. It can be seen that, if his average attribute points were not only 5, he would have wanted to rush up and kill Ian at this moment. Ian was shocked. How could it be possible? How could he be so decisive? "I'm a damn Lannister family. He killed me without hesitation." This absurd order stunned the mercenaries around, and they all looked at the same person. Looking at this scene in front of him, Ian suddenly realized that he forgot that the traveling merchant had 100 gold dragons at the beginning. Unlike poor people like himself who can only find mercenaries individually, the traveling merchant has sufficient funds to let his servants directly hire an entire mercenary team. According to the characteristics that players appear in this world out of thin air, he only needs to confirm with the mercenary captain that there are no new members joining their team recently to eliminate the risk of players mixing into the mercenary team. Madman. Do you want to offend the Lannisters? Ian looked at the mercenaries around him who were eyeing him covetously and could only pretend to be calm. "Kill me, and from now on the Lannisters will hunt you down to the ends of the earth. No matter where you hide, you will be found and crushed to dust. A Lannister will repay his debts, whether it is a favor or a grudge. The Rias family of Castamere is the best proof of this. P.S. The Rias family was once the second richest and most powerful family in the West. because they rebelled against the Lannisters. They were exterminated by Tywin Lannister, and their castle, Castamere, was destroyed. The famous ballad The Rains of Castamere tells the story of the Lannisters' ruthless suppression of the rebellion. Fuck you Lannister. You're such a good storyteller. You're a good actor, Kit. If I hadn't known that the Brotherhood Without Banners was an organization that was established after Eddard Stark sent Lord Beric and Thoros of me to hunt down the mountain after he plundered the Riverlands, I might have really been fooled by you. Harrowy glared at Ian and sneered. He just wanted to skin and cram the guy who had tricked him. This guy's not a bastard of the Lannister family at all. He's just a liar. Kill him. Kamer, I command you, kill him. Harrowy ordered the captain of the mercenaries again. Wow. How could I forget this? This must be Gal's fault. Who told him to start with Robert going north and set up a Brotherhood hunter as a starting profession? Otherwise, I would never have remembered it wrong. Ian's heart sank to the bottom of the valley in an instant. At this moment, Harrowy had 15 mercenaries around him, 1/3 of whom were cavalry, and there was no possibility for him to escape unscathed. Too much talk leads to mistakes. I have studied A Song of Ice and Fire for so many years, but I didn't expect to fall into a trap because of a small mistake in the timeline. Wait. Timeline? Exclamation mark. Ridiculous. Ian suddenly laughed loudly, hoping to use laughter to cover up his nervousness. What are you talking about? The mountain plundered the Riverlands? When did it happen? Sir Gregor has a bad reputation, but when I left Casterly Rock, he was still staying with the Duke. Don't accuse my vassal of a crime. The mercenaries burst into laughter. And our Lord Stark is still in his shitty Winterfell. When did the affairs of the Riverlands come under his control? Are you hallucinating? Ian continued to laugh. I'm not. I mean Harry didn't know how to explain for a moment. He didn't expect that this fake bastard would actually catch his flaws in the same way. Remembering the wrong timeline is a fatal mistake for players, but this cannot be a reason to convince these mercenaries, because to the mercenaries, the future events discussed between players are nothing but crazy talk. How can Heru explain to the mercenaries? Is it possible to tell them that you are just a group of natives, and we are the chosen ones who know the future? Chapter 19. Humble Pawn. I really don't know why you are so mad. Just because you failed to kill your enemy yourself? You want to kill me? You even use some crazy words to slander me. Ian saw that the situation was turned around, so he took advantage of the victory and said, I'm sorry, I really didn't know that the hatred between you was so big. What did that guy do? Did he sleep with your wife? In an instant, the laughter around them became louder. 30. Heru held up 3 fingers. He couldn't explain to the mercenaries, so he simply talked to them in the language they could understand best. Kill him, I'll give you 30 gold dragons. The laughter of the mercenaries stopped abruptly, and Ian only felt a burning gaze cast on him, and the air was filled with greed. Oh, really? Are you looking for a Lannister to compete with you for financial strength? Ian sneered, then looked at the captain of the mercenaries. Kamer, kill him, no matter how much he offers, I will pay twice as much as him. You can't afford this money. Heru had just said halfway when he suddenly remembered that the other party had already taken the first kill mission. He could only clench his fist and swallow his words. Of course I can afford this money. Ian also took over with a smile. He wanted to claim the prize in the system immediately and then take the money out of his backpack, but he suddenly became a little alert. These mercenaries are all Heru's people. What if these guys are tempted by the money and rob me and kill me after I take out the money? I don't have any money now. Ian showed a contemptuous expression, but my servant will naturally bring the money later. Lannisters must pay their debts. For thousands of years, we have never defaulted. No one doubted Ian's words. Whether it was his identity as a bastard of the Lannister family or his jeweled dress, Ian's words were full of persuasiveness. Annie, I don't have time to log into the system now. Can you help me collect the prize directly? Ian asked in his heart. Yes. The gold dragon reward has been issued. Due to the lack of storage space for players, some of the reward gold dragons will be carried and escorted to the players by the reward NPC. 1 liter of gold weighs about 37 kilograms, and 3,000 gold dragons weigh about 45 kilograms. In addition, the shape of gold coins and gold bars will occupy more space. A grid storage backpack really can't hold so many gold dragons. But why did I think of sending a courier for no reason? Ian complained in his heart, but he also knew that now was not the time to be clever. When will the reward NPC arrive? You have 3 options for your self-selected NPC this time, namely, Son of the Warrior, Raven Teeth Guard, and Elite Oath Knight. After you make a choice, they will rush from the nearest resource point 5 kilometers away. Hearing these 3 choices, Ian was really stunned for a moment, because the first 2 arms had long disappeared in the long river of history. The Sons of Warriors is the name of an armed cult of the Church of the Seven Gods that was disbanded long ago during the reign of the 4th monarch of the Targaryen dynasty. The long-lived King Xia Ze. The Sons of Warriors are also known as the Order of the Holy Sword or the Order of the Star Knights. All of their members are knights who have been anointed with holy oil. They have declared that they will give up their titles, castles, and territories. Their responsibilities are to protect the temple and safely escort the pious to pass by from robbers and pagans. Their position is probably similar to that of a paladin without the power of holy light, and they are undoubtedly the top level troops. But Ian rejected this choice without hesitation, because the Sons of Warriors carried Pinru's wardrobe. They wore rainbow cloaks with the emblem of a colorful crystal sword shining on a black background, silver-plated armor, and used star-shaped crystals as the weight ball for the hilt. They were very coquettish. If 2 Sons of Warriors came soon, I'm afraid no one would believe that they were Lannister's servants. P.S. Here is a special explanation for readers who have only watched the TV series. The image of the warrior's son in the TV series is actually closer to the Poor People's Assembly, another armed sect of the Church of the Seven Gods at that time. The Poor People's Assembly, as the name suggests, needs no further explanation. The second Raven's Teeth Guard is the private elite of the famous noble bastard blood raven Brynden Rivers, the 11th king of the Targaryen dynasty, king of the insignificant Aegon IV. This guy is a legend. He served as the Prime Minister of 2 Kings, and later became the Commander-in-Chief of the Night's Watch, and then became the Three-Eyed Raven. He is still alive today, so I won't go into details here. They use magical fish beamwood bows. Their most famous record is in the Battle of Red Grassland, when they quelled the Blackfire Rebellion. They shot and killed the hostile King Demon Blackfire and his twin sons at a distance of 300 yards. They are also undoubtedly the top long-range units. But Ian did not choose them either, because they had no horses, and could not get here at the fastest speed. After choosing the most inconspicuous, but statistically indistinguishable Elite Oath Knight, Ian looked up at Captain Cameral, seeking his answer. To Ian's surprise, Cameral refused him, after hesitating for a long time, turning sides in battle, and swinging swords at employers. Who do you think I am? I think you are a mercenary. Otherwise, who else can I think of you? I don't even want the money I give you. Is it too little? Ian was confused. Heru, who was opposite Ian, breathed a sigh of relief, and secretly felt lucky that he had not chosen the wrong person. Sir Cameral's mercenary team has always been the most reputable one near the town of Earl Harroway. It was for this reason that Harald chose them at first sight, and offered 12 gold dragons, which was several times higher than the normal price, to hire them from another person. It is rumored that this Mr. Kamer is the eldest grandson of an earl, but when he was very young, his family had to sell the territory due to bankruptcy, and in his generation, even the title was lost. He relied on his own efforts to win the title of knight in the battle where King Robert quelled the rebellion of Balon Greyjoy. In order to revive his family, this Sir Kamer has always regarded honor as more important than life, and his sense of honor is what Heru relies on most at the moment. It is true that Heru has no way to compete with a Lannister bastard who has received the first kill reward in terms of financial resources, but he is Kamer's employer, and Kamer has been a mercenary for more than 20 years, and has never been involved in a scandal of breaking his oath. You mean you rejected my proposal? Ian confirmed. If you think it's too little, I can actually offer 3 times his price, or any price you offer that you think is satisfactory. Note, it's any price, as long as you offer it. Ian added again. He had enough confidence to satisfy the other party's appetite. After all, Jaime Lannister was only worth 1,000 gold dragons, and he was a bastard, so the other party could only ask for 200 at most. All the loyalty and honor in the world is just because you don't give enough. Sorry, sir, my honor does not allow me to betray my employer. Kamer seemed to be a little moved, but his answer made Ian feel disappointed. Ian only knew that Ned Stark was a woodenhead who adhered to honor, but he never thought that he would run into such a weird honor mercenary on the first day of the game, although this mercenary was carefully selected by another player. If you value honor, what kind of mercenary are you? However, Camel changed the subject immediately, which made Ian's heart go through a roller coaster ride. Similarly, my honor does not allow me to launch an infamous murder against a nobleman. Therefore, as long as you swear here that you will not target my employer, I will let you go. Can you please stop breathing so hard? Ian pressed his left chest and felt that his heart was almost jumping out. Before Ian could speak, Haru could not sit still. He almost subconsciously retorted, "Goddamn nobleman, he is just a bastard." Then he changed his words in a ridiculous way. He is not even a bastard, he is just a liar. The agreement we signed is to protect your life and help you ambush and kill your enemies. Now that your enemies are dead, we only need to be responsible for your safety. Camel's tone of refusal was as firm as the previous refusal to Ian. This made Ian feel a sense of respect in his heart. It was probably respect, but it was not ridicule at all. "I'm your employer, I order you to kill him." Haru was furious. If he could see himself, he would definitely think of the scene of Emperor Joe shouting, "I'm the king." However, Ian was no longer willing to make trouble. He was not obsessed with killing Haru. After all, he had already grabbed the first kill mission. The reward for killing another early player at this time was not worth his continued risk. At this moment, it was a completely acceptable result for Ian that both parties left. Therefore, he swore to the sky without hesitation. "I, Ian Hezhan, swear to the 7 gods on the honor of my father and the Lannister family that I will never hold Mr. Haru, Sir Kamer and his mercenary team responsible for what happened today, and I will never initiate any revenge. Otherwise the judgment of the father will come to the Lannister family. The Lannister family has nothing to do with you." Haru gritted his teeth. "Thank you, sir. May the 7 gods bless you." Khmer bowed slightly, then turned to Haru and grabbed him. "Let's go, Mr. Haru. Sir Ian has sworn not to hold you accountable for what happened today, so don't provoke him again." Obviously, he understood the sentence "the Lannister family has nothing to do with you" as an insult to Ian's legitimate identity. Haru felt very aggrieved, but he could only hold back those meaningless explanations, because he knew that without evidence, everything was empty talk. He just felt that he lost this time inexplicably. It can be said that from the moment the fake illegitimate child appeared, he never connected the other party with the player. Haru couldn't figure it out. A noble knight riding a thoroughbred warhorse worth at least 20 gold dragons, wearing a brocade hunting coat, a gold threaded shawl, a gilded belt worth no less than 3 gold dragons, and a Lannister emblazoned sword on his belt, was actually a player. He came to cheat and sneak attack me, a merchant comrade with an average attribute of only 5. What's this? Does he have a recharge window? I should have recharged earlier. That guy pretended to be the illegitimate son of the Lannister family. The damn Cameron didn't dare to attack him. Cameron didn't know what he thought of. Haru, who was originally depressed, suddenly looked up at Ian, with a gleam of brilliance in his eyes. "Do you think today is destined to be a draw?" "Draw? Yes. If you say it's a draw, then let's call it a draw. Anyway, I've taken advantage of it." Thinking of this, Ian nodded in agreement. "Yes, it's a draw. I don't mind if you say you won. But I won't accept it," Haru said in a low and sinister voice. "I wonder if you've ever heard a saying." "What?" "The saying that little Fina taught Sansa in the Game of Thrones. The humblest chess pieces have their own desires, and sometimes they will refuse the actions you have designed for them." Haru smiled creepily. Ian's pupils shrank immediately. Chapter 20. The Final Kill. Part 1. Mercenaries. Haru suddenly shouted, "Your captain refused to kill the bastard in front of you for his honor, because he didn't dare to offend the Lannister family. He wanted to revive his family, take back his grandfather's castle, and live in Westeros." Haru knew that he couldn't prove that Ian was a fake, so he simply admitted that he was the bastard of the Lannister family. "But you don't have to. I offer a reward of 80 gold dragons for his head." With this money, you can fly away and leave the days of licking blood on the tip of the knife and live a wealthy life in Essos. Harry raised his purse high, and this time he was completely all in. In an instant, the mercenaries who had been quiet because of Sir Cameron's order became restless again. 80 gold dragons is a huge sum of money that these mercenaries have never seen in their lives. In the face of such temptation, what is the honor of the captain? What is the threat of the Lannister family? Go to see the White Walkers. He is now fish on the chopping board. Don't look at your companions. Go ahead. The fewer people who take action, the more money you will get. Haru instigated again, and then looked at Ian proudly, but Ian's expression made Haru's face freeze. Because Ian was also laughing, Haru turned back in surprise, and found that Camel was staring at him angrily. Haru realized that he had just crossed the line by trading directly with his mercenaries without Camel. But so what? With Camel's dedication to honor, could he still kill his employer? You will still protect me, right? You swore to me. Haru laughed fearlessly, with a hint of madness on his face. You won't become a breaker of oaths, right? Camel turned his face away, did not answer, but acquiesced to Haru's words. Ha 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 ha. After getting a satisfactory answer, Haru laughed even louder, and he looked at Ian again. You bastard. You are still laughing. What gives you the right? Why are you laughing? Why do you have such a mocking expression on your face? You are richer than me, but what's the use? I can use money to incite these mercenaries to kill you, because they can kill you, but you can't let them kill me, let alone double the price, even if you offer 10 or 100 times the price. With Kamer and his personal soldiers protecting me, those incited mercenaries have no capital to hurt me at all. In front of them, there is no option to kill me at all. I'm already invincible. And you, I'm about to die. The victory or defeat is already decided. Protect me well. Wait for my servant to arrive. I will pay you the same reward as him. Ian said lightly to the mercenaries around him, then looked at Haru, and responded with a playful smile. Then, Haru's smile froze on his face. It took him about half a minute to understand the meaning of Ian's words, and then he suddenly felt that he did not lose unfairly, because if it were him, he would definitely not be able to make such a perfect response. There are at least 2 clever points in the fake bastard's response. First, he just wanted to save his life, and he didn't want to turn these mercenaries against him and let them kill him. If the fake bastard gave the mercenaries the condition of killing him, then the mercenaries would be intimidated by Kamer's strength and long-term prestige, and they might not dare to accept it, even if he offered 10 times the price. Unfortunately, the fake bastard retreated to advance, and directly gave up killing himself, thus avoiding a direct conflict with his biggest supporter, Sir Kamer. Kamer originally planned to let that guy go, and as long as he didn't make things difficult for himself, Kamer would definitely not make things difficult for him. The second clever thing about the fake bastard was that he clearly wanted to save his life by paying a ransom, but he didn't directly ask for money in exchange for his life, but instead paid his ransom in the form of rewards to these mercenaries who protected him. From ransom to reward, a small change in the name completely changed the nature of the incident. If he had proposed to pay the ransom in exchange for his life, after being threatened by the mercenaries, then the relationship between the two sides would be hostile, and the mercenaries would have to worry about revenge from the Lannister family, even if they got the money. However, he paid the ransom in the form of remuneration, which defined the relationship between him and the mercenaries as employment cooperation, which was equivalent to giving up the reason for revenge. In this era, where everything pursues claim rights and just cause, the move of the fake illegitimate son of the noble is tantamount to giving the mercenaries a reassurance. It's an honor to serve you. As expected, a mercenary who originally planned to attack Ian began to bow and swear. My sword is yours. The mercenaries surrounding Ian changed sides one after another, and even many of the mercenaries who were originally hesitant and did not participate in the siege of Ian ran to Ian to swear. For the mercenaries, this was a choice that did not need to be considered, because taking Ian's money not only complied with Captain Cameral's previous decision to let Ian go, but also did not need to leave their hometown for fear of the Lannister family's revenge, and they did not even need to do anything, which was almost like getting something for free. However, taking Haru's money would risk being retaliated by the Lannister family, and the difference was obvious. So soon, there were only 5 guards left by Cameral's side, and the others all gathered around Ian. The situation has reversed. Ian snapped his fingers and looked at Haru with a smile. I thought this move was a decisive kill, but there is no such thing as a reversal of the situation, right? Haru had already admitted defeat in his heart, but he still tried to save some face for himself. For me, the worst result is just a draw, isn't it? Ian did not answer, but just looked at Haru quietly. Why, do you still want to kill me? Haru was immediately angered by Ian's obvious contemptuous attitude, and he turned around to look at Cameral beside him. Sir Ian, you swore an oath. Khmer didn't understand the conversation between his employer and the illegitimate son of Lannister, but he still reminded Ian. Yes, I swore an oath, on the honor of the Lannister family. Ian nodded, and looked coldly at the end of the dirt road from the salt well to the town. The setting sun cast a fine light and shadow on the ground through the treetops, and 2 knights riding side by side appeared in people's field of vision. They were both wearing full body plate armor, one light green and the other pure black. The knight in light green plate armor wore a closed helmet, and the visor was lifted over his head, revealing a bearded face, which was particularly intimidating with his strong physique. He rode a tall warhorse with a red robe and a thick iron-clad round shield on his back. The other knight was even more muscular than the knight in light green plate armor. He was over 7 feet tall, with a 5.5 foot long 2-handed giant sword on his back. He was not wearing a helmet, and his long light brown hair was scattered behind his head. His eyes were sharp, and his overall facial features were very handsome for a man of his size. My squire is here, Ian said to the mercenaries around him with a smile, and the mercenaries all looked towards the end of the road following his gaze. No one noticed that Ian clenched his fist slightly, his fingers retracted into his palm, and even his breathing gradually became rapid. Squire. Hearing Ian's words, Adam, the old mercenary who had been pretending to be a foreman, looked at the 2 approaching full-armored knights, and was so shocked that his mouth could not close. 7 layers of hell. Your squires are all wearing full body plate armor? It is said that a set of that thing costs at least 10 gold dragons. I can't help it. I'm a bastard. If I'm not generous to my subordinates, how can anyone be willing to follow me? Ian quickly adjusted his state. He shook his head in a bitter tone. After all, I'm so poor that I only have money left. Money is good. What did you say? Nothing, nothing. The old mercenary shook his head quickly. Soon, as the 2 knights approached, the mercenary team entered a state of alert. They originally thought that the squires Ian was talking about should be 2 ordinary half-grown children, so the 2 heavy armored knights who suddenly appeared gave them a deep sense of oppression. Relax, I said that they were my squires, and they brought everyone's commission, Ian said loudly, while looking at the old mercenary Adam. Put down your weapons. The old mercenary hurriedly said to the people around him. Sir Ian is our employer, what are you talking about? Obviously, Adam's reputation among this group of idiot mercenaries is not low. After he said this, the mercenaries still remained vigilant in their hearts, but at least they put away their weapons. Seeing this, Ian nodded to the old mercenary, then raised one hand above his head, and made a stop gesture. He shouted to the knights 5 meters away, you just stop there. As expected, the 2 knights stopped where they were. Who is the old dog? Throw 80 gold dragons over here. Pay attention, throw it, Ian ordered. He knew that the 2 knights had more than 80 gold dragons on them. The 2 knights looked at each other for a full 7 seconds, before they finally decided who was the old dog. Then the old dog wearing light green plate armor untied the bag hanging beside his leg, and began to count the gold dragons. That lord, the old mercenary wanted to say lord. After all, the knight counting gold coins looked a little too majestic, but he quickly stopped and changed his words. The squire is called Old Dog, the son of a kitchen cook, born in a lowly family. He followed me before my father took me back to the castle. This is his nickname, Ian explained. He is a little stupid, but very loyal. When I get my surname back, I will find a chance to canonize him. Canonize a son of a cook. The old mercenary couldn't believe his ears. Loyal service will be rewarded generously. This is my principle, and illegitimate children will never despise others because of their birth, because we are no nobler than anyone else from the beginning. Ian smiled self-deprecatingly. It's his luck to meet a master like you. Haha, actually it's just a thought now. After all, it may take more than half a year for my father to recover from his injury and marry my mother, and only then can I become a real Lannister. Ian waved his hand. Then, Ian turned to the green armored knight who had already counted the gold coins, nodded to him, and motioned him to throw the gold coins over. The green armored knight grabbed the gold coins and threw them all out 3 times. The scattered golden dragons immediately attracted a rush of mercenaries. Lannister has paid his debts. Goodbye, everyone. Ian took the opportunity to get on his horse and ran towards the 2 knights. Halfway through, Ian looked back at Haru, and that look made Haru feel like he was falling into an ice cave. Haru didn't know why, but he felt an ominous premonition rising from his heart. Captain Kamer, I want to leave. Take me away now. Now, Haru said hurriedly. Don't worry, Sir. Ian swore that he is not a Lannister at all. Haru roared. You are here again. Kamer was a little helpless. He didn't understand why his employer had been entangled in this issue. Anyway, I'm leaving now. Haru gave up the idea of continuing to explain and hurriedly climbed onto an old horse. Because of his poor riding skills, he held the horse's neck tightly with both hands and urged again, hurry up, hurry up. Seeing this, Camel did not insist, but gave the order to the guards around him to set off. But to his surprise, none of his confidants moved. They all stood there, staring blankly at the direction of the setting sun. Camel became suspicious and followed the mercenary's gaze. He saw Ian, who had come to the 2 knights, holding a gold bar high above his head. The red gold was particularly dazzling under the setting sun, emitting a fairy tale-like intoxicating halo. Chapter 21, The Final Kill, Part 2. Now, the Lannisters, who always pay their debts, have proposed a new deal, Ian announced loudly, holding up a gold bar. I have a gold bar weighing more than 2 pounds, worth 150 gold dragons. Whoever cuts off Iruai's head for me will own it. In addition, he will become my new squire, and I will make him a knight within 3 years. Iruai's ominous premonition came true. Ian's words hit him hard in the heart. He roared at Ian, asshole, you broke your oath. Then he looked at the few Kamer's confidants around him in panic. It was not until this moment that he realized that he had underestimated Ian's ambition. He thought that Ian was retreating to advance by paying the incited mercenaries in the form of remuneration and forcing a draw. But he did not expect that Ian was retreating to advance while killing their hearts. Killing the hearts of Kamer's confidants. As soon as Haru finished speaking, he was pulled down from his horse by a mercenary beside him. His fat body fell heavily to the ground. When he looked up, he saw the cold light of the dagger. The one who did it was one of Kamer's confidants. He pulled Haru off the horse and cut Haru's throat with a knife. At the moment of death, Haru felt indescribable regret in his heart. If he had accepted Kamer's advice at that time, he and the illegitimate child could have left each other peacefully. Why did he have to be the first to alienate Kamer's mercenaries? Originally, no one had thought of disobeying Kamer's orders. It was because he broke the window first that the illegitimate child found the opportunity to smash his fortress to pieces. After the mercenary who killed Haru succeeded, he quickly distanced himself from Camel and others. He retreated while shouting to Ian, "It was me, sir, I killed him. What I said was, who will give me his head?" Ian responded coldly. At the moment Haru died, he heard the prompt sound from the auxiliary system. Now that his goal had been achieved, he was ready to run away, but before running away, he needed to cause a little chaos. As soon as he finished speaking, all the mercenaries moved. They first killed the servants around Haru with random swords, then rushed to the corpse and joined the fight for his head. Camel stood in the crowd, angrily trying to stop these people, but his efforts were in vain. Because Ian shouted loudly the next moment, "Lannister has a debt to pay." Then he threw the gold bar in his hand out. When the gold bar hit the crowd, most of the mercenaries immediately gave up the fight for Haru's head and rushed to the gold bar instead. Because the Lannister knight had already paid the money, the lord didn't care who took the money in the end. Since it was like this, why couldn't I be the one to take the money? Seeing all this, Ian finally let go of his worries. He turned his horse's head and ordered the knights around him to leave. "Let's go." "Just leave like that?" The knight in green armor was a little surprised. "What? Is there a problem?" Look at all this. The knight moved his eyes to the corpses on the ground. There is a massacre here, and the Tully family's investigation team will be here soon. I don't know what your status is in the Lannister family. If it's not too high, I believe the Lannister family will not tear their faces with the Riverlands for a bastard, and you will be wanted. This. Ian was stunned. He had calculated everything, but he really forgot about the law. After all, this is a world close to the Middle Ages, and killing people seems to be a normal thing. But Westeros has not yet fallen into war. With the security of the Riverlands, it is possible that the massacre in the salt mine has attracted the attention of the Duke, and so many people have seen my face as the illegitimate son of the Lannister family. Indeed, I only need to abandon the fake identity of illegitimate son of the Lannister family and fuse the lion head on the hilt. In this era where only portraits are used for wanted, it is simply a pipe dream for the law enforcement team to catch me. But the problem is that I did not travel alone. There are nearly 100 players in this land. How many possibilities can the flaws I exposed in this matter have that are unfavorable to me? Ian made up his mind, took a deep breath, and asked the knight beside him, if we want to kill all these people, how sure are we? He didn't want to gamble. 70%. If we join the battle now, they will soon see through our intentions, and will probably stop fighting and unite again. The knight shook his head seriously. And the terrain here is not conducive to fighting on horseback. If we dismount, we will be besieged. Although most of them are lightly armored, there are too many people, and there are several good fighters. After that, the knight added, of course, as long as you give the order, we can solve everything. No, Ian shook his head immediately. These two knights are his biggest asset now. Unless it is absolutely necessary, he doesn't want to take risks with them. What's the difference between a 70% chance and a gift? So Ian looked at the mercenaries not far away again. At this moment, Kamer had killed the guard who just killed Haru and the old mercenary Adam who led the riot, and confronted the mutinous mercenaries with other guards. The mercenary who accidentally grabbed the gold bastard between the two groups and trembled. After all, he is a veteran captain with a high prestige. He can control the situation. Ian couldn't help but comment, then shook his head. It's too risky for us to enter like this. Sir Kamer, it seems that you still have a lot of things to deal with, so I won't bother you anymore. See you later. Ian deliberately shouted loudly, and after looking at Kamer provocatively, he rode away. The two knights obviously didn't understand what Ian wanted to do, but they still followed Ian's footsteps and ran out, and soon they were on the King's Road. The three of them only ran 2 miles, and Ian stopped on the King's Road, then turned his horse's head, and looked in the direction of the salt mine. The two knights also stopped. I thought you wanted to kill them all. The green armored knight said immediately. Of course I will, but I won't do it recklessly. Ian shook his head and explained. I just instigated those mercenaries to kill Haru, destroying the reputation that Camel has built up over the years, and instigated infighting among his mercenaries, which almost destroyed his forces and his hope of getting back his grandfather's title. He wants to skin me and eat my flesh now, and he won't let me go. When he sees us running away, he will chase us soon, but they only have 5 horses, and the old horses in Haru's caravan can't run at all, so there will be no more than 5 people chasing us. We have to deal with Camel here first, and then go back to deal with the remaining remnants. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 22, Chasing, Part 1. What if he doesn't chase me? The green armored knight was a little confused. The look in his eyes when he wanted to kill someone could not be hidden. Cameron eats my blood to wash away his shame. For the sake of his honor, he will definitely chase me. If he is the kind of person who will let his honor be dishonored, he should have agreed when I offered him double the price to kill Haru at the beginning. A gentleman can be deceived by tricks. Just as Haru had taken advantage of Kama before, Ian also took advantage of Kama at this moment. By the way, I haven't asked your name for so long. What's your name? Ian suddenly thought. Me. The knight was stunned for a moment, then laughed and said, Old dog. Sorry, I didn't mean to offend. Ian apologized quickly. I was trying to. Ian paused, somewhat embarrassed. I was trying to leave those mercenaries with the impression that no matter what their status was, they would have the opportunity to be promoted to nobles here, paving the way for their rebellion later. My name is Roll, and his name is Keith. Roll introduced himself. Then he suddenly looked up and gave Ian an admiring look. They are really chasing us. Protect yourself and run away if you find something wrong. With the strength of your horse, they can't catch up with you. Hearing this, Ian looked to the west and saw 4 cavalrymen appear in his field of vision. The leader was wearing a plate chainmail, obviously Captain Cameral himself, while the other 3 were only wearing ordinary leather armor and armor. You bastard, oathbreaker, murderer. You have no honor. When the distance between the two sides was more than 50 meters, Ian had already heard Cameral's angry roar. Ian fixed his eyes and met a resentful gaze. At that moment, Ian even felt that the murderous intent in the air had condensed into substance, which made him a little frightened, and the hand holding the hilt of the sword trembled slightly. Without stopping the horse or more verbal attacks, Camel raised the front end of the spear and began to speed up, rushing towards Ian first. The flat and wide King's Road is very conducive to the running of war horses. Soon, the warhorse under his crotch changed from a fast pace to a canter. At the same time that Camel accelerated his sprint, the black-armored knight Keith, who had never spoken, also rode out and met him. After giving Ian a look to pay attention to safety, Roll also launched a charge. In just a blink of an eye, the two sides had already exchanged hands. Camel, who was in the front, pointed his spear directly at the gap between Keith's helmet and breastplate on Keith's neck. Keith dodged to the side, thinking that he could easily avoid this clumsy spear. Unexpectedly, Camera's lance skills were superb. He predicted the direction of Keith's dodge in advance, so Keith was still hit by Camera's spear on the huge left shoulder armor of the black plate armor, even though he dodged so much. Fortunately, Camera's spear tip not only failed to penetrate Keith's thick shoulder armor, but because the spear in his hand was not a lance with a high toughness spear shaft, but an ordinary spear, the fragile spear shaft suddenly broke under the influence of speed and angle. The strong impact forced Keith to hold the reins tightly, and then stabilized his body with the help of the stirrup, but this action also made him miss the opportunity to counter-attack Camera, and he could only let the two horses pass by. Camera was also shocked by the reaction force of the collision. As the spear shaft broke, he immediately discarded the useless spear while struggling to maintain balance while trying to draw his sword, but before he could do so, he met Roll, who was following Keith. Seeing his opponent rushing towards him without dodging, Camel had to take the initiative to change direction to avoid a collision between the two horses, but in the process of turning sharply, the warhorse under his crotch lost balance and fell straight to the left. Roll lightly lifted the reins and easily avoided Camel, who was rushing towards him. He swung his sword sideways at the maximum distance of the long sword and cut off half of Camel's left palm. Camel completely lost control of his mount. The horse under his crotch, which had already lost balance, ran forward another 7 or 8 steps, and then fell to the ground with the man and the horse. The moment it landed, Camel's left leg was broken. A low scream was heard on King's Avenue. After rushing out a few meters, Roll reined in the warhorse under his crotch, pulled back the reins, turned the horse's head, and rushed towards Camera again. Roll lowered the long sword in his hand, lay on the horse with his chest close to the horse's back, rushed in front of Camera, and stabbed Camera's neck with force. The tip of the sword sank into Camera's throat from the side, but Roll's warhorse did not stop. The speed of the sword in Roll's hand cut off Camera's spine, unscrewed half of his throat, and the whole headband flew out. After rushing out a few steps, Roll did not stop the horse, but turned sharply again, and went in the direction of Keith. At this moment, Keith obviously needed his support. Well, Keith didn't seem to need his support so much at this moment. Roll's crotch loosened and slowed down the horse's speed. He couldn't help but cover his face and smile bitterly. It turned out that in the time he was dealing with Camera with a broken spear, Keith had killed 2 opponents alone. 2 bodies were placed on the King's Avenue, one of which had been cut in half by the chest. The last cavalryman under Camera was frightened by Keith's fierce attack. With all his companions dead, he simply couldn't muster the courage to fight the knight who looked like a black iron tower. taking advantage of the time when Keith had distanced himself from him because he was dealing with another companion. The cavalryman turned his horse's head and fled north. "Catch him!" Ian shouted, and then rode his horse to chase him. Of course, he couldn't just sit there and watch the cavalryman escape. Any survivor today was a potential risk. Ian rode his white horse at full speed. With the advantage of a good horse and no armor, he surpassed Roland Keith in an instant and caught up with the fleeing mercenary cavalryman. Ian held the unsheathed emblem sword in his hand. It was not until the opponent was almost in his attack range that he suddenly thought of a question. Can I beat him? Unfortunately, he didn't have time to think through all the problems as usual. His horse surpassed the fleeing cavalry's horse in the next second. He could only swing his sword intuitively, based on the experience of horseback fighting gained from the profession of mercenary knight. The fleeing cavalry skillfully raised his hand and blocked Ian's attack with a sword. Ian only felt a shock in his hand, and he was a little unstable on the horse. The fleeing cavalry seemed to realize that this pursuer was a half-baked soldier. He turned around and slashed at Ian with a sword. Ian hastily blocked it, but the sword in his hand was directly knocked out. Chapter 23, Chasing, Part 2. Fortunately, the other party wanted to escape and did not want to kill Ian. After knocking Ian's sword away, the mercenary looked at Roll, who was already close at hand, and hurriedly clamped his spurs, trying to continue to flee north. Unfortunately, he was slowed down by the fight with Ian, and his escape speed could not return to its peak for a while. Just a few seconds later, he was caught up by Roll and pierced through the back with a sword. Seeing this scene, Ian couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief, but at the same time he was also frightened by what had just happened. He couldn't believe that he, who always regarded himself as steady, would rush towards the enemy like that. When his horse ran at full speed, all his rationality disappeared, as if all the hormones in his body had turned into adrenaline. This reminded him of a description of the state of cavalry charging a horse that was unbridled carrying a drunk person. Shaking his head, after making up his mind not to take such an adventurous attempt again, Ian began to reflect on this first battle in the true sense, since he entered the world of ice and fire. Ian could not say that his performance was remarkable, but rather embarrassing. During the battle, his mind was almost blank. Although he had obtained the memory of the riding and swordsmanship skills that a hired knight should have from the system, these memories were completely uncoordinated with his body, and he had no muscle memory at all, so that he had no idea what to do next. Although this was related to his lack of actual combat experience, it also indirectly illustrated a problem. The layout data was quite unreliable. He was even thinking about letting Roll retrain him systematically in his spare time. Looking back, Roll had already led the escapee's empty horse back to the bodies of the other mercenaries and was sorting out the spoils with Keith. But Ian's attention was not on the spoils, but on the equipment of the two knights. This time, Ian rarely wanted to greet the planner, because the reward was really awesome. Obviously, the S-level NPCs rewarded by the system also have top-notch equipment, and there is no need to say much about armor. When Ian saw Cama spearhead Keith, his heart sank. He didn't expect that he couldn't penetrate Keith's defense. Although this was related to Keith's successful dodge, which caused the opponent's spear tip to hit the thickest defensive left shoulder armor on his body, Keith's plate armor was undoubtedly the best of the best to be able to successfully defend under that speed of sprint. Then there are the war horses. You must know that Luor and Keith are both fully armed. In this case, they only caught up with themselves who had actually been defeated by the enemy after only a few seconds slower than themselves. This shows that their horses are even better than their own thoroughbred horses. Such a configuration is definitely a rare conscience discovery for the style of the dog planner of this game. Soon, Luor and Keith completed the collection of the spoils. 2 horses, an exquisite longsword, a dozen gold dragons, a large bag of other coins, and a set of plate chainmail. Of course, although it is called plate and chainmail, this armor is just a piece of metal plate added to the chest of the chainmail, a bit like the one worn by Stannis Baratheon in the TV series Game of Thrones. Ian didn't understand this. Stannis was a king, even if he died of poverty. Would the director give him a stronger defensive armor? Even if he had to be given a plate and chainmail, it should at least be the kind worn by Zeo Yun in the movie Red Cliff, right? Why did Zhao Yun wear a plate and chainmail more than 10 centuries in advance? In short, under the influence of the embarrassing performance just now, Ian was somewhat worried about the fancy clothes he was wearing now, so he took off his coat, pulled the blood-stained armor from the dead camel, and put it on himself without any disgust. Then he put on this set of plate and chainmail with the help of Luo. Ian and Camel have similar figures, and this set of armor was surprisingly suitable for Ian, after he put it on. After completing all this quickly, Ian ordered to turn back and rush to the salt mine in the town of Holloway. When they returned to the salt mine, the battle here was not over yet. The surviving mercenaries were divided into two groups and were confronting each other. One side had 3 people and the other side had 4 people. They seemed to be exhausted. Obviously, the situation got out of control again after Kama left. These mercenaries probably formed small groups, based on their usual close relationships, to fight for the gold bars. There were a total of 3 people who were seriously injured. It was estimated that, even if their various small teams won the final battle, the money would not be shared by them. The appearance of Ian and the other 2 broke the short-lived balance between them. The mercenaries looked at the bloody swords of Roll and Keith, and seemed to realize something. At that moment, perhaps countless thoughts came into their minds. Is it a desperate resistance? Run away? Or kneel down and beg for mercy? All of them, but it doesn't matter, because before that, Ian had already given the order to attack. Everything was too late. The battle ended in just 1 minute. The 2 knights chopped down several mercenaries who were still resisting like cutting wheat, and then dismounted to kill several remaining blood who had already fallen to the ground with serious injuries. After confirming that there were no survivors, they began to search for spoils. During this whole process, Ian's eyes were always looking in another direction. The night there swallowed up the last ray of sunset, and on the inky black curtain, a bright star map was slowly lighting up. Perhaps, in that star map there is a distant blue planet, where there are no merciless executioners, no mercenaries kneeling on the ground begging for mercy, and no crying and wailing of the pursued. There is a harmonious society, a stable legal system, and a dead game planner named Xia Ze. Soon Ian and his team completed the inventory of the second wave of spoils. This time, most of the items were abandoned by Ian. He only left behind Kama's family sword, a high-quality half-hand sword, 2 exquisite daggers, 3 adult river horses and Kama's plate chainmail. Of course, in addition to this, there is the most important thing, money. Kama and the mercenaries' own money is almost negligible. The most important thing that Ian and his team took back was the 2 commissions that Ian paid, and the remaining 80 gold dragons of Haru. Ian put all the gold bars into the backpack of the auxiliary system, and the remaining 500 gold dragons were put in Luo's bag. Then they left the mine, and came to the Green Fork River not far away, and began to wash the blood on their bodies. Can you tell me why you were so confident that you could turn Kama's guards against you? Just as Ian was washing his clothes, Luo suddenly asked Ian. Chapter 24. The people are not in poverty. You came to me and asked me to take out a gold bar for you without hesitation. Judging from the prestige that Cameral showed at that time, you shouldn't have been so confident. Luo immediately further explained his problem. Surprised that Luo would take the initiative to think about such a complicated problem, Ian's face froze for a moment, and then he slowly said, the reason why I'm confident in turning those guards of Cameral is because Ian thought for a long time before translating this ancient saying from his previous life into the common language of Westeros. The people are not worried about the scarcity of wealth, but the inequality of wealth. The people are not worried about the scarcity of wealth, but the inequality of wealth. Luo repeated Ian's words, obviously not quite understanding what it meant. Do you know why I asked you to throw the 80 gold dragons to you? Ian asked immediately. I can't get too close, lest the mercenaries become alert. Luo guessed. Ian was half right, but he didn't say this, because I want those mercenaries who are still with Kama to see that their companions are dividing the money and the shining golden dragons scattered on the ground. You know, in the eyes of Kama's cronies, the mercenaries around me at that time were a group of fence-sitters, outright traitors, and scum. But it was this group of scum, this group of old guys who were no different from them the moment before, who suddenly divided up a huge sum of 80 golden dragons. They went through life and death, so many times to earn back some silver deer that were barely enough to be cool a few times, and this group of people did nothing. Nothing in the true sense. They just came to me and swore an oath. No fighting, no adventure, no injury. These traitors did nothing, and each of them got more than 10 golden dragons for free, but they got nothing because of their loyalty and honor. And I just want them to watch the traitors divide the money. I want to kill their hearts. Luo didn't say anything, but his expression betrayed his surprise. Just when the hearts of Kama's guards were filled with jealousy and regret, Ian slowed down his tone and continued, I gave them another chance to get the money, and added weight, increasing the bounty of 80 gold dragons to 150, and also provided a possibility of becoming a knight, and then bang. The defense line in their hearts was broken. After listening to Ian's words, Luo was stunned for a long time, before bowing his head and respectfully saying, thank you for clearing my doubts. Ian smiled back. He was very satisfied with the result of this conversation. Don't look at his eloquent and high-sounding speech. In fact, it can be summed up in one sentence: confidence from post-dubbing. Because things have already happened, and I have succeeded, so whatever I say is right. As for the confidence of inciting Kama's guards to rebel, come on, what confidence can he have? He just tried it. If we really talk about confidence, he just has the confidence to run away after the rebellion fails. As he said before, there were only 5 horses in Kama's place. As long as he turned around and ran, Kama could only bring 4 people to chase him. With the strength of Kez and Roll, it might be difficult to fight 15 mercenaries, but it would be no problem to fight 5. After all, they were top units that could be ranked with Warrior's Son and Raven's Tooth Guard. Later, Roll and his team also confirmed this in the battle. The two of them fought against 4 mercenary cavalry including Kama, which was as easy as killing a chicken. Of course, he couldn't say these words to Roll. The reason why he made this explanation to Roll was to improve his image in the other's heart. After all, Roll gave him the feeling that he was not an NPC with AI, but more like a normal human with independent thinking ability. For such an NPC, Ian needed to rely on his own ability to maintain the other's loyalty. Rewarding NPCs can guarantee absolute loyalty. Anne's voice suddenly sounded in Ian's mind, refuting Ian's speculation. Oh, how can you guarantee that? The S-level NPCs rewarded by the system are all religious warriors trained by the organizers in this world since childhood. Their loyalty may even exceed that of the Unsullied. Trained by the organizers? No wonder there are professions that have long disappeared. Ian nodded thoughtfully in their cognition and ignored Ian's words and continued to explain. The players assigned to them to serve are the incarnations of the gods they believe in. Therefore, although all the reward NPCs are living people with various life experiences, they will remain absolutely loyal to the selected players and will not question any decisions of the players. It is equivalent to explaining the competitive behavior between players through religious brainwashing. Ian understood a little. In this way, the core NPCs who are the players' confidants will not doubt the players' weird behavior in the knowledge that does not belong to this era that the players may show at any time. But why do you have to get a group of natives to be NPCs? Just put a group of bionic people like players, and then add AI to them. Isn't it over? Our laws prohibit putting AI into bionic people, Anne explained. In short, using the natives of this world as NPCs will help improve the player's immersive experience. Ian pursed his lips when he heard this. Only a fool would believe this explanation. After all, they have already traveled to a real world, so why do they need to improve the sense of immersion? And if you really want to improve the immersion, wouldn't it be more perfect to just cancel the system? What Annie said at the beginning, that they forbid putting AI into androids, can better explain this point. After all, Ian had long suspected that the organizer of the game was some advanced civilization. This setting does not affect the plot of this book. Readers can understand that the civilization is the world we live in, and the organizer is a company called Gideon Redding. That's it. There is no point in thinking about these. In comparison, what is more meaningful is that, after confirming the attributes of the NPC religious death soldiers, Ian no longer needs to be shy in front of them, nor does he need to make up stories to cover up his identity change or any future plans, and he doesn't need to worry about their loyalty. Help. How can there be such a perfect reward in the world? After learning about the setting of religious death soldiers, Ian was in a good mood and looked at his two new subordinates again. My lord, where are we going now? Luor asked when he saw Ian come out of his daze. As for why Ian suddenly became dazed just now, Luor and Keith did not show any doubts. Aren't all the clergy like this? Chapter 25 Reward Settlement, Part 1. Now, Ian's first reaction was to continue to squat in Salt Pan Town. Unlike the entanglement and panic, before he drew his sword against the Brotherhood hunter who attacked Haru, Ian no longer had any psychological burden about hunting players. Just as the hunter who didn't deserve a name shot an arrow into the chest of Haru's substitute without saying a word, Haru gave his mercenaries an order to kill him without hesitation after discovering that he was a player. The relationship between players is a life and death relationship. Since the players signed the agreement and came to this world, they have become enemies to the death. Although Ian still had an urge to vomit when looking at the corpses on the ground, he understood it more than ever at this moment. If he had been a little soft-hearted or hesitant in the previous confrontation, Haru would be standing next to his own corpse and sighing about life. Therefore, going to Salt Pan Town to continue hunting merchants is indeed a good choice. After all, he has made a detailed plan for this, and now he has 2 more knights under his command, and his chances of winning in squatting are undoubtedly improved a lot. But for me who already has 2 powerful knights and more than 3,000 gold dragons, this doesn't seem to be the most cost-effective solution. Ian suddenly had this idea again. After all, his hunting plan in Salt Pan Town is only for traveling merchants, and his expected result is to spend a month to squat on such a success. Admittedly, this result was already very ideal for him before. After all, as long as he gets the kill points, he can gain a period of development time without being threatened by the assassination mechanism. But now, he is no longer threatened by the scoreboard, so finding a way to develop quickly is the most important thing, and the best way to develop is to run business. Let's find an interest for a night and make a decision tomorrow, Ian said. He wanted to deal with the reward settlement first and analyze the new task first. If we find an inn, the nearest inn to us is the Crossroads Inn. We are at most 2 hours away from there. Luor nodded. We can rest there for a night, replenish wine and food, and then make plans. Crossroads Inn. Hearing this familiar name, Ian's eyelids jumped. Although the Crossroads Inn is not far from here, we have dealt with all the survivors. Even if the bodies here are found tomorrow, no one will suspect us. Luor saw Ian's expression and thought he was worried about this. Ian shook his head, indicating that he was not worried about this. He was just reminded of the name. Crossroads Inn, that was the hunting place he originally envisioned. Unlike Salt Pan Town, which can only be used by traveling merchants, Crossroads Inn, due to its special geographical location, that can be called a thoroughfare for 4 provinces. The probability of players appearing there is probably ranked in the top 3 in the entire Ice and Fire world. The first is Pentus, where players gather to lick the Dragon Mother, and the second is where Ian doesn't know. He said that the first 3 are used to not saying enough. In short, for Ian, who has discovered the big flaw of the player's starting equipment, Crossroads Inn is almost a perfect hunting ground. He gave up going to Crossroads Inn and chose to go to Salt Pan Town because he was worried that he could not beat those players who had strong force in his previous life. But now, he has 2 such powerful NPCs and such a huge amount of funds. He only needs to confirm with the mercenary captain that there are no newcomers in their team when recruiting mercenaries, just like Haru did, and he can safely hire a mercenary team, thus gaining an absolute advantage in force. Therefore, the plan of hunting at the Crossroads Inn was put on his desk again. But the cost effectiveness of doing so still seems to be low. In the early stage, a player is only worth 4 points, and if you don't kill him personally, it's only 2 points, and there is almost no extra income. Maybe squatting here for 2 months and killing a few players will bring you less benefits than a business trip. Thinking of this, Ian shook his head again and denied this view. Although hunting players does not bring many points, other players have no way to get points. If he can rush to the top of the ladder list, the reward resources obtained plus the attribute points obtained by hunting players may not be comparable to a business trip. and even if it is not for these rewards, it is definitely beneficial to eliminate some players in the early stage. After all, you never know how much the players can develop in the later stage. For example, Heru, with the strength shown by that guy, if he does not die, but develops to the later stage, how much threat will he bring to himself? Taking advantage of his current great advantage, the best solution is to kill as many of these seeds as possible in the bud. Go to the Crossroads Inn. Ian gave the order. He planned to have a good meal and a good night's rest first. Before setting off, Ian ordered Roll to take him a ride, after taking off his armor, saying that he was too tired. Anyway, they had seized 3 spare horses, which could be used to carry things. Of course, the real reason he did this was that this shitty system must be logged in with eyes closed, and he couldn't ride a horse with his eyes closed for a long time. After officially setting off, Ian closed his eyes and logged into the system and started today's reward settlement. The first thing that caught Ian's eyes was the red dot on the mailbox. Ian, who had a slight obsessive compulsive disorder, clicked on the mailbox without hesitation and then began to read the received emails one by one according to time. Complete the bounty mission 1 First Blood. Get 3 attribute points, 3 skill points, 3000 gold dragons, 2 S-level NPCs of your choice. Already received. Successfully kill a player. Get 4 points, 1 point for seizing, and 2 extra points for strength. Subordinates successfully kill a player. Get 2 points, 1 point for seizing, and 1 extra point for mental strength A. The points for subordinates to kill and seize are also 1 point. Is this rounded up? Ian smiled. Although 0.5 points are not much, it is always happy to get something for free. Thinking about it, he continued to click down. Achieved E-level highlight operation. Get 1 point. Highlight operation? How is this calculated? Ian remembered that Annie mentioned this thing when the mechanism was introduced, but he temporarily chose to ignore it because he had too much information to digest at the time. Unexpectedly, he accidentally got a few points with this. Highlight operations mainly refer to the behavior in which players make amazing decisions in planning or response, and thus gain significant benefits. The judgment of highlight operations will be based on the system's built-in AI algorithm. The highest highlight level is S, and the lowest is D. Annie answered Ian's question the next second. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.